And then full blow. There we go. Recording live on YouTube. Welcome to everyone to the Centerville work session of August 18th, 2020, being held at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom conference. We have a couple of items of business today that we want to discuss in the work session. The UTA bus route update and the Weber Basin Water Conservancy water conservation discussion. Let's go with the roll call to start to Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Councilwoman
Here.
Fillmore.
I'll start voting.
Councilwoman Fillmore.
Present.
Councilwoman Ivy.
Here.
Councilman McEwen.
Here.
And Councilman Ince.
Present.
Great. All five are accounted for and present. So we have with this the first item of business is, like I said, the UTA bus route update. We have Beth Holbrook and Hal Johnson here to discuss this. Now, in our materials, they provided a presentation just for us. I met with them and also three other mayors, a month and a half ago. And Mayor Talbot from Farmington and myself said that we needed to have route information and how the buses would be, what streets they'd be going down, what the costs would be, and all that type of thing. I said I'd have to have that to be able to take it to my council. So they said that they put something together. Brant followed up with them and they have put something together and are here with this to us to discuss it. I know in the hour and a half we spent before, I gained a greater understanding of it than I had presently. And so I wanted to bring it to all of you. So Beth or Hal, which one's going to take it away?
Beth's going to lead out.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Hal to get into that nitty gritty. I appreciate the opportunity to have the dialogue. I thought that the meeting that we had about a month and a half ago was really, really valuable as well. And I want to make sure that everyone on the council gets an opportunity to ask us questions and to get a greater understanding of the BRT discussions that we're going to have tonight. We just as a side note, we have already done this presentation for Bountiful City, and we are working to get onto Farmington City's council as well. And just some background and perspective, the bus rapid transit was the locally preferred option, and in 2018 the legislature provided $1.3 million to do an environmental study on the proposed route. And Hal's going to talk about some of those details, but I just kind of wanted to tee this up and talk about kind of the what this is and what this isn't. So the bus rapid transit, or BRT, right now it has a super long name, Davis Salt Lake City Connector. Obviously we will find something smaller at some point. The original dialogue is to go from Woods Cross through Bountiful, through North Salt Lake, into Salt Lake, and connect into the Salt Lake system in terms of the transit side. And what we are talking about is somewhat of a larger scope than initially thought about, because we had such a good public response. And I wanted to also talk about some of the background of UVX, which is our bus rapid transit down in Utah County. For those who might or might not have had an opportunity to go down directly and take a tour for themselves, the UVX line actually goes from our Orem Frontrunner station. It hits both UVU as well as BYU, and then goes through Provo and then ends in the Provo Frontrunner station. It basically is a community connector piece between the Provo station and the Orem station. And if you can't see, I'm sorry, I use my hands to talk and do framework discussion, so apologize on that. And it basically is a community connector that has basically roughly a U route methodology. The initial thought on UVX was that we would have about, maybe 6,000 riders a day. And pre-COVID, we actually were around 14,000 riders a day. The universities both worked really hard to embrace this as a new model of getting connectivity for their students, as well as the community. About 70% of the riders in that particular one are students, but 30% of those are community people. So just wanting to go on an outing. I live in Provo and I want to go to Orem, whatever that is, they're riding that system as well. And the thing about the South Davis discussion, so I'm just going to call it South Davis. Know that that's not really the name, but I think it's just easier for us all to understand from Davis County. The South Davis proposal is going to become kind of a connector piece between the North and the South, and how we can best do that. One other thing I wanted to talk about is, and I don't know if you guys have any questions in the meantime, but I did want to talk really quickly about our COVID recovery response. And I'm going to send an email link to everyone so that you can actually pull up all of the data that we have. So we created an open data portal on our recovery methods and the sanitizing, the bus service and everything, and then the ridership, as well as what we're doing with our funding that we received in order to basically cover some of the ridership declines that we experienced after COVID. And I'll talk more about that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to do that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Hal, and then we'll swing back and cover it from the next step. So thanks, Hal.
So do you guys want me to show the presentation from my computer, or did you want to show it from the version we sent in? It's the same, and I can do it from either.
Hal, if you have it, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll have Leah do it.
Yeah, I can share my screen here and pull it up.
Then you can move it however you want to move it.
Okay. So are you able to see the slides there?
I see them. Is everybody good?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Beth, for the introduction on the project. So I just have, I think I've got about 15 or 20 slides here for you, and I'll go through them really quickly to give you a little bit of background about the Salt Lake Davis connector and kind of the update on the project. So these are the topics I wanted to, I'll cover through the presentation quickly. I know you have limited time. I want to talk a little bit about the existing bus service, the regional transportation plan that Wasatch Front Regional Council has developed, purpose and need of the project. We've done a couple open houses as well as some digital feedback mechanisms. So we got some feedback about the project. Terminus options, I'll talk a little bit about ridership modeling and potential next steps. So we have two major bus routes that connect through Centerville, the 455 and the 470, and they're regional routes that go from Weber County through Davis County to Salt Lake County. And the 455 and 470, you can see on the maps there, the circles represent the relative numbers of boardings at the different stops on the lines. And so you can see, on the 455, a lot of boardings in Ogden and downtown Ogden. 470, I've got a lot of boardings at the Air Force Base. And then in Centerville, you can see that we have a lot of stops in Centerville, and they're all lightly used. And so we do get a good number of people that use the bus service in Centerville, but it's not as concentrated as some of the other areas of the line. And I'll talk about that more in a few minutes as well. So the long-range plan from Wasatch Regional Council, I think you all are probably familiar with that transportation planning process where Wasatch Front Regional Council identifies the regional transportation plan for Salt Lake, Davis, Weber County, and Tooele County, as well as Box Elder. And Wasatch Front Regional Council, they've noted the Salt Lake Davis connector or South Davis BRT project has been in the plan for quite some time. And it's noted as connecting from the Woods Cross Station to downtown Salt Lake, as Beth mentioned. I should have put one more slide in here, but the regional council plan also notes a future connection from Bountiful up to the Woods, up to the Farmington station as well. So this is just a little bit, Beth covered through some of this, so I'll skip through pretty quickly. This is just a map of the Salt Lake Davis connector that was identified in 2014 as the preferred alternative. So it connects from the Woods Cross Station to downtown Salt Lake. And then the thick part of the line there is what would be exclusive lanes. And then the piece that is the thinner part of the line would be shared corridor. So it would be, this would operate more like buses in traffic with stops on the side of the road. And then the middle part would be stops in the middle of the road with exclusive lanes. So we've done a few different public involvement events. So we had a open house in Salt Lake County and one in Davis County last fall. And we had a good number of people, total about 40 or so people came to the open houses. We got a good number of surveys. About half of those people filled out surveys and gave us comment cards as well. And then we also did some digital outreach. So generally, people were very positive about the Salt Lake Davis connector. They saw a lot of value in being able to have faster, more frequent transit connections to tie with those key destinations. One of the things that we did was this, we call it a dot map. And so we gave everybody a dot to place where their origins and destinations are. So the blue dots were, where do you want transit to take you to? And then the red dots were, where are you coming from? And so one of the things that kind of surprised us on the maps is, and we got this in the comments as well, in both Salt Lake and Davis County, there were a lot of people that were interested in connecting to the Farmington station. And so we got a lot of both origins and destinations noted connecting to the Farmington station. Other public outreach, other comments that we got, there was a lot of interest in people connecting to the church office building, LDS church office building in downtown Salt Lake. People generally supported the higher level of investment in bus rapid transit. So generally bus rapid transit was, I've got a graphic I'll pull up in it here in a second, but it's a higher level of investment. So it's a cross between some fixed guideway, non-fixed guideway. And so we're able to really improve transit service with a modest capital investment. So it's not as significant an investment in as a rail system, you know, light rail or streetcar, but it definitely moves the meter with respect to getting more riders and being able to provide better and more consistent service. So the other comments we got from folks is there was a desire to connect to the Red Line as well as potentially the University of Utah as the current 455 does. And we had some business owners that had concerns about property loss. Online survey, we actually got a lot more responses through the online survey. So we got about 192 responses through the online survey. And destinations that people noted, kind of downtown Salt Lake, Farmington came up again for us through the online survey, Bountiful, North Salt Lake. And the other questions that we heard is people were definitely interested in using transit if it was faster and had fewer transfers. And so it kind of speaks to being able to have a more connected service. And then Farmington and the U came up as kind of proposed destinations. So in downtown Salt Lake, we're looking at kind of some different alternatives right now. And this is probably the meat of the discussion for tonight is Bountiful and Farmington and some of the other cities are really interested in seeing the potential connection of service from the Farmington station to onto the Salt Lake Davis connector and down to Salt Lake County. And kind of what we're thinking about with the dashed blue line is wouldn't be any fixed guideway or exclusive lanes, but would be service. And so we would, right now we operate the 455 and 470 through the community. And so with this thinking is that we would have combine those routes. So they would both terminate at the Farmington station. People would transfer at the Farmington station, and then we'd have a route that would run from Farmington into Salt Lake City and potentially up to the University of Utah. And so,
can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
When you say Farmington Station, I just would like to be sure I know what you're talking about. Are we talking the shopping complex, or is it some kind of a bus station I'm not aware of?
It's the commuter rail station that's just kind of north and east of the shopping center there.
Yeah, it's the Center Cal development. But keep in mind that there are currently bus stops along that route. So picture it in this way if you can. So Front Runner runs along the west side of I-15, then you have I-15, and then these run east of I-15. And they do have current bus stops along there as well. And one of the infrastructure improvements that could ultimately be really valuable is we would add the signal prioritization component to that. And basically what that is if the light senses that the bus is near, they basically talk to each other. It keeps the light green so that that bus can go through, thus increasing the opportunity to have faster service.
So, and I've got a couple more slides to kind of talk about it. So what we, looking at this potential connection to Farmington, so we're thinking of this as service with, as Beth touched on, with transit signal priority, stop improvements. We'd have a branding scheme for the bus, like we call our system in Utah County, it's UVX is a name of it. So we'd have a name for the system. And then we looked at the ridership connections. And so we've identified kind of the connection to Farmington really has some potential big increases in ridership for the project. So we've looked at it kind of in the enhanced bus or BRT options. So you can kind of see the range there between, I'll just talk to the BRT one. So between 2,000, 2,600 riders for the piece from Woods Cross to downtown Salt Lake. But if we add the connection to Farmington, potentially getting up to 4,200 riders, because it's not so much we're getting a lot of boardings in Centerville, but we're providing an opportunity for a lot more regional connections for people to connect to additional destinations. And so I guess what the proposed Farmington extension is bus stops and stations and stop improvements, branding. We'd have some kind of a barrier-free fare collection system like we do on Front Runner and Light Rail. There's a few key sections where we'd like to see sidewalk and crosswalk improvements in the corridor, enhanced frequency, and then we'd have no exclusive lanes or fixed lanes in that section of the project. So it would really be, just the service connections.
Well, I don't see this in a future slide. One of the main questions, you've got increased frequency, but does that come along with reduced number of stops, and how reduced?
That's a great question. So yeah, we would have, right now the stops are, in a lot of cases, they're less than a quarter mile apart. And so as we've been kind of looking at it, and I've got a specific proposal that we're working on that I can share with Mr. Hansen and get some input from the city on. But we're thinking of widening out the spacing to third to half a mile between stops. And so, yeah, we would definitely have a little bit less frequency of stop locations, but that in part enables us to run the service faster, and we would focus in on those major intersections and key locations.
So can I input?
Yes, Mayor.
So right now we have a 455 and a 470 route that will run between like Weber State and the U of U, or Weber State and downtown Salt Lake, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so what we would be in that 455 and 470 it mainly runs down our main street. It cuts off in a couple of spots. I have taken that many times downtown Salt Lake. And it takes a bit. It takes about 45 minutes to get from my house to the office. On snowy days, Councilman Ince, for when he talks about Farmington Station, that's the front runner station in Farmington.
Right.
And then Woods Cross has a front runner station. On snowy days, I've driven there, and rather than bash up my car, I take 2 hours to get in Salt Lake and jumped on the front runner train and gone all the way to the Salt Lake station and got trapped. So what that does, it takes the 455 and the 470, if I'm hearing you right, just from like Weber State to the front runner Farmington station. And then you get on a bus there that would be the BRT route through Centerville, eliminating the 455 and 470. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the big advantages that is that I haven't checked the schedule, but oftentimes those 455, 470 run probably pretty close in time frame. So you're not getting, you're getting, basically 2 buses together versus, a bus every 10 to 15 minutes. So much more kind of frequent, like regular buses versus kind of the bus bunching that we see with the current way we operate it.
So, but what I'm also hearing is that we would be reducing the number of available pickup locations and increasing the distance. So in order to service this, we would be reducing the available service in Centerville. Is that?
And I'll send Mr. Hansen the maps that we've put together, and I think it'd be worth, we were happy to have a more detailed discussion. I didn't put it in the presentation tonight. But we would, as I say, kind of right now the stops are less than a quarter mile apart, so we would be looking at more in that third to half mile spacing, which is, it's a little bit further apart, but it's definitely very walkable. And the benefit of that is we're able to go from just sign by the side of the road to having a shelter, having a branding and marketing of the stop. And so we've seen studies that show there's a big gain in ridership if you're able to kind of make some more substantial improvements in those stop locations.
Just to be clear though, we're talking about the increase in distance on Main, but also obliterating the 4th East line. So then that's also going to be increased in distance to get down to Main for those who are east of 400. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's you're hitting on the same point, which is when I look at who the ridership is generally, as I see people who are waiting for that bus, some of them I would be concerned about adding extra distance to their commute to access a bus line.
Yes, me too.
I want to let you get through your presentation, Hal. Just know that one of my major questions that I will want to make sure we have time for is what the 455 and 470 look like without the Farmington extension compared to what it looks like with. So,
Yeah.
but we'll just need to get to that, but I'd love to hear the rest of what you have to say.
Okay, perfect. So I guess with respect to, I just want to maybe really emphasize kind of what's not proposed, no fixed rail, no bus lanes. And, as I mentioned earlier, the long range plan doesn't identify any kind of fixed guideway improvements in this section in the plan that goes out to 2050. And One of the things that I think would help with some of the questions and concerns about the 455 and 470 is I did want to mention we've been running in Southwest Salt Lake County what we call microtransit, and it's on-demand transit service that, and if you're not familiar with it, I should have put a couple slides in here, but it's basically
Uber type of modeling. So it's like on demand from your phone. So similar to Uber, but obviously not the pricing structure that exists. Sorry, go ahead, Hal.
Yeah, I was just that was perfect, Beth. I was just gonna say it, and it really works well. I've ridden it before, and it's a very Uber, Lyft-like experience riding it. And so that was kind of what we were thinking would be the tool to kind of fill in the gaps, if you will, and actually be able to provide a much more complete network than you have that's provided by the current 455 and 470, because the microtransit enables you to connect to and from a lot more origins and destinations. So we were thinking that this might be the best of all worlds, where you've got a much faster, more reliable trunk line system, and then a microtransit system to kind of help support and fill in the gaps.
So when you say you're using some buzzwords that I'm not that familiar with. So when you talk about that, are you talking about feeding, I guess, the 455 by running a strictly regional service that transports people from either east or west down to the 455 route? Is that what we're referring to?
Yeah. So
In essence, yes, that's exactly what it would be. So just for some background on VIA, that's actually a private provider for this service. And VIA is basically, like I said, it's an on-demand system. So you have an app on your phone. It is actually designed to, it's just a regular van. It holds about 6 people. It does have the capability to hold people who have disabilities. So if there's an ADA requirement, that's available as well. So it is, and it's designed to be within the area and connect or do that first and last mile to the nearest stop, whatever that is. So not necessarily a designated stop per se, but whichever one is the nearest to wherever that person is connecting to.
So one of the thoughts I had for you guys, and I kind of put it in the next 2 slides, is kind of understanding some of the previous discussions about transit that have occurred in the past. One of the thoughts we had was to try to do a pretty significant public outreach effort, kind of focused on Farmington and Centerville, to get some input back into the process. So we wanted to kind of be able to do a little bit of media outreach. We did a pretty big media outreach on the previous public involvement, and that enabled us to get a lot more comments, and then wanted to do some, I guess, promotion of that through the city website and the other city tools that you guys have available, and then wanted to do kind of a public involvement survey, and then potentially, depending on what we can do given COVID, either some more online meetings, or if in-person meetings are possible, then we would like to be able to have some in-person meetings. And what we're interested in doing is really getting some input and feedback on this proposed change of the 455 and 470, and kind of understand any public concerns about kind of making these improvements, as well as be able to kind of have an open dialogue, be able to understand what all the needs are that people have that live in the corridor, to be able to best fit a transit solution to that.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about really quickly, and then I think, I apologize, you do still have one more slide, I missed that. But just really quickly, when we did our NEPA analysis of what was then the proposed or locally preferred option or alternative for the BRT. It was the Woods Cross Frontrunner Station up Fifth South to Main Street in Bountiful, and then heading south through North Salt Lake onto Beck Street, et cetera. And that part of the process, once we had the public meetings, really led us to a greater dialogue, because when we engaged the public, we got feedback that said, well, I want to go to Research Park, U area, and I want to go to Farmington. Those are the two outliers. Now the 455 currently does do that. And, but the Farmington piece is a different thing. And that's a connectivity piece that was worked both ways. So people in Bountiful were like, I want to go to Farmington. I'm going to, you know, I would love to have my kids go to Lagoon. There's a definite interconnectivity that we discovered once we finished this portion of the NEPA process for the locally preferred alternative at this point. And the thought then was, which we presented in the Wasatch Front Regional Council meeting, was if we incorporate Centerville and Farmington into this, we can provide that greater connectivity. We can also improve the service. We can make it more frequent. The better connectivity, the better it is that people use the service. And frequency, we have found with our UVX line, has been one of the keys to keeping people in there and using that service so often. When you go to a stop at UVX, you don't have to wait. At their peak times, I think they're like at the 10 minutes, and then off peak is 15 minutes. So you're really getting a connectivity that is enhanced, because you don't have to sit there and go, well, now I have to wait longer and I don't know when that bus is going to come. And that's kind of what we found with UVX. And so the discussion, which is why we are here tonight, is we need to understand more of what Centerville and Farmington residents are wanting, what the council's wanting, and getting that greater feedback. And if we can expand the NEPA to incorporate Centerville and Farmington, then that might help us to better service this area. And like Hal mentioned, it's in alignment with what the Wasatch Choice, the Regional Transportation Plan from WFRC, has outlined in their 2050 modeling. So
And
sorry, Hal, now you can go to your last slide.
So the kind of the last slide that I've got here is to be able to add the Farmington and Centerville connection to the Salt Lake Davis connector project that's underway would be some added cost in the environmental process. And so what we've talked about with the other stakeholders is basically splitting that $95,000 cost. So UTA would pay for half of it. And so about $47,500. And then we've talked about splitting that remaining balance between the four stakeholders. So it would be basically about $12,000 each between Farmington, Centerville, Bountiful, and Davis County. And so far we've had conversations with Davis County and Farmington and Bountiful, and all are indicating that they're willing to put in on that. We don't have a written agreement, but they're all have verbally committed they would participate.
And can I just ask, are you going that route versus going back to the legislature to just add to the cost of what they already are paying for, just for timing wise?
Yeah, legislative, we think it makes more sense to try to do this locally, as it's a relatively modest amount in the overall scheme of things.
And about timing, it sounds like this would just get connected to the existing project. And so if we added in this NEPA work, would the timing of the construction, if it were decided to move forward, be connected to the previously planned BRT line?
Yeah, that's the intent with this, is to be able to make this a seamless part of the project. We don't have the local funding in place for a Salt Lake Davis connector, so we're still kind of in the process. The typical transit development process is we'll have to kind of identify the project, define it, And then we work on fundraising for it. So as Beth mentioned on the Ogden BRT project, I think we've got maybe 6 or so different funding sources have all come together to be able to leverage a federal grant to be able to build the project. So we would make this a seamless part of the overall project at this point in the process. If we don't do it now and then look at it in some point in time in the future, it would be a much more expensive effort to do it in the future. So there's a big advantage of kind of doing it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear this report because it just was against all common sense, in my opinion, to have it stop at Fifth South and Bountiful, because South Davis is interconnected. It's almost as if we're one big city, right? So this just makes so much more sense.
And that's exactly the feedback that we received, Councilwoman Fillmore. It really is exactly that. It's like, if I'm in North Salt Lake and I want to go north, how can I do that? And if I'm, in Centerville, how do I get to Research Park? There was this real connectivity piece that really struck us.
The plan to have BRT end at Fifth South and connect to the Woods Cross Station actually harmed the transit system. Anything north of that was the impression that I had. And so I have some specific questions. Is this going to be, and I know the details aren't worked out, right? That's what all of the studies and the steps will be, but in concept, I'm wondering if we're talking about, okay, I understand moving the 455 to connect with the, here, I'll get back on video now that we don't have the slideshow. The 455 connecting or combining with the 470. And then if we did do this connectivity from Farmington all the way through, then there would not be a bus change or transfer at the Woods Cross Station, right? You'd be able to get on in Farmington, say, and stay on the same bus.
Yeah, that's the intent.
Okay. And then another question I have in concept would, let's say you get on in Farmington, would the bus be going down to the Woods Cross Station and then Ewing back up? Would you have a line that went straight through that mimics what we have now?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we're thinking is we would have the line that connects from Farmington through as one seamless service. And then we would have a second line that would come in from the Woods Cross Station at 500 South. And then that would feed into the fixed guideway section of the corridor. So we have the major investment. We would have 2 lines serving that. And then
because one of the major feedbacks we got through the earlier process was that when you're in this area of South Davis County, you're just so close to downtown that it doesn't make sense to go further west to a front runner station.
Yeah.
And to keep that more east connection that just goes straight through is pretty important.
Yeah. So we would be consistent with that. And so I think with providing the second service in from the Woods Cross Station, it's really the best of all worlds. We're able to provide that through service from Farmington and Centerville, as well as that key connection from the Woods Cross Station over to the hospital in Bountiful, and then onto the guideway. So it provides, and then more frequent service in that. As you saw in that slide, I had the much higher density of boardings on the south end of the system.
So your modeling is all based on pre-COVID, and we're hearing that a lot of organizations are very interested in not returning to their workplaces. I've heard targets from major employers anywhere from 50 to 70% of their workforce will never maintain a permanent desk at their original place of business. How do you see that impacting your ridership?
That's a good question. And one of the things that we see right now is that there's actually a lot of discussion about not returning for some of those commuter elements where they are able to work from home, but the telecommuting only works to a certain extent for those particular riders. There's still a large population of people who actually have to get where they need to go. So just for a little bit of background, even during the height of COVID, when we were shut down in April, from actually mid-March, I think we had March 12th, it just kind of started to plummet. And then we had the earthquake and it really plummeted, and then we were shut down. And even during that time, we still had 41,000 riders throughout the system. And we have found that these bus rapid transits and these local connector pieces that are interconnecting within communities are still pretty valuable. People still need to get to where they need to go. They need to get, essential workers still need to get to the grocery stores, the doctor's office. Those are the elements of people that are still in that community trying to get from one side of it to the other. Now, when you talk the commuter or the teleworking, that does impact our front runner system, and the front runner has the largest percentage decline at this point. And I've talked to multiple developers in the commercial retail elements and office, and they're all kind of in this phase where they are not quite sure. There's studies on both sides of the spectrum that say, telecommuters are going to rule and people are not going to go back to offices. And then there's other discussions where, well, we're still going to need that office space because I have to social distance, or I have to allow my employees, different elements that I wouldn't normally have to. So the square footage, in essence, could actually work out to be mostly comparable. There's also studies on productivity and everything else. And it started out that there's a high productivity response to telecommuting. And now they're doing some studies, and it is a little more challenging when you're talking about children going back to school and other elements of people's lives. And that's where, I hate to say this, everything that I've just said is really kind of framed in a bit of a question mark, because different elements of these different groups have kind of different data. And we are just kind of going to see how this transitions out. But I will say every developer that I have talked to thus far, given the way that Utah has recovered, the economic development pieces, and then the growth potential, which is still almost number one, if not number one, based on various national organizations, that is going to continue to be a challenge, and it has to be addressed. And transit is that piece that can add to the value of the growth, because it's an infrastructure that can be there in place once we run out of land, basically. And so it is a great question, and I think that there's a lot of dialogue on that, but this is what I'm hearing at this point.
Can I fill in what you didn't hear because you weren't yet at UTA? And that was the last time that we had this discussion. And we said, we don't want bus rapid transit in Centerville. It doesn't serve our population well. We don't want to put in the money for it. And as I'm looking, you're telling me that 233 people commented. That's the combination of the online and in the open house. Mm-hmm. And for 233 people, I'm not willing to spend $12,000, especially given that not all those 200 people are from Centerville. So we're looking at our Main Street and saying we've had some reconstruction of Main Street this last little while. We've had some schools on lights. We've got a lot of school crossings on Main Street. We don't want bus rapid transit coming on Main Street, and especially when it is giving priority at the light, that will slow down and clog our Main Street in a really serious way. And I don't have any interest. I really don't. And when I look at the number of people at the buses and I see that it's only going to benefit a handful of people, I have a hard time saying $12,000. I've got a lot of other things in my budget that I'd rather do with that money. So that's why we originally said, we're not sure we like this. You go right ahead and do it. Stop at Bountiful. Don't come into Centerville. We'll see if we like it, and then we'll pony up some money later if we like it. That was the original discussion back in, I think Hal was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think.
And yeah. I kind of think later could be here a little bit. And I appreciate your perspective, Councilwoman Ivy. And I think that there is a lot to doing this, but one of the pieces that $12,000 is going to go towards is actually targeting Centerville and Farmington residents. They were not targeted in the previous dialogue because they weren't part of the original. And this is why we wanted to expand the NEPA in the first place, because we do need that feedback. So I agree with you. The feedback has not hit Centerville or Farmington, and that's where it needs to be. And that's why this is our proposal / request, is that we want to have that connectivity potential, but we need to understand more of it and what that framework would look like.
And what we said is, we don't want it on Main Street. Show us that it works in Bountiful, and then we'll think.
Well,
And I don't change my idea. So
okay, what I certainly heard is we do not want the full scale BRT going down our main. We don't want dedicated lanes. We don't want a widening of main. We don't want, and what I think we need to be sure to have a full discussion about, it would be the consequences to the connectivity and the transit system as it is now in Centerville if we did not participate and encourage this connectivity, because it would completely, in my opinion, obliterate the usability and accessibility of our existing transit system, which many of our residents do appreciate. And then the other thing that's really important to remember is looking into the future. And as Beth pointed out, at some point we run out of land. We're going to keep growing and growing and growing, and those freeways can only go so wide in lane width. And people start realizing in future years that if they want to get somewhere, they're not going to get on the freeway. It's going to be more convenient for them to just walk down to Main Street and hop on the bus.
Well, my question, Tammy, would be, is Main Street really the right option? I don't know if the speeds are modeled that for the bus rapid transit. I've been down, I've seen the system down in Utah County, and they move along at a good clip. If you've ever been in Centerville on a Wednesday afternoon, and I call them the protest drivers who can't seem to understand that it's a 40-mile-per-hour road, who will never do more than 27 to 29 miles an hour down Main Street. Your models account for that sort of snags on a regular basis, which we see, versus, for example, the frontage road or a connection on 1250. Because Tammy, if we're gonna have to Uber people over from 4th, what's the difference between Ubering them to the frontage road or Ubering them to, say, 1250 West, if we're looking at routing?
And that was what we suggested, was that we have a transportation corridor in Centerville, and it's not our Main Street. And that's something that we as a council understand, but it's not something that UTA may understand from the outside looking in.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Are you saying that in Centerville, the transportation corridor is not Main Street?
No, I'm saying there's a good place to put transportation. And when the theater was put in, there was talk about putting in a station there. And it still makes good sense.
But what about south of Parish?
What about it?
The frontage road doesn't go continuous.
No, not on the west of the freeway, where the theater is.
So structurally, if I'm understanding you correctly, if you're talking west of the freeway, you're talking the front runner system. And currently, the front runner doesn't stop in Centerville, as we all know. And the connectivity piece that I think is really critical, that might not be part of this dialogue, but needs to be said, is that one of the most challenging things is getting the east side connectivity piece, in the case of our geographically, constrained area, getting that piece to parallel the front runner system. So front runner is obviously west of the freeway, and Main Street is actually that corridor and 4th East right now today. Those are the transit corridors that are being utilized by residents. And it's that getting to the east side thing. It is a critical element to doing that connectivity, especially if you are either heading north to Farmington or south to Salt Lake. And so that should be part of the dialogue, because one of the bigger challenges is making sure that, how do we get the people, the majority of Centerville residents actually live east of the freeway. And that's where we think the ideal model is to service that area specifically. So it would be more of this is an Eastern freeway discussion.
But we're also looking at this as a north-south transit, where Centerville is kind of in the way. We're trying to get through Centerville to get from Salt Lake to Farmington. And I'm being a little flip there. But if as a resident in Centerville, if I want to get from north to south quickly, I don't do it on Main Street.
No.
I use the frontage road. There are other methods for me to get from north to south in Centerville a lot quicker than the Main Street.
And Main Street has the disadvantage of being the school crossing for almost all our schools. And that's not a good model for a bus rapid transit to be coming through every 10 minutes when you've got, how do you keep up with the schedule when you're going to have that many school crossings that you're going to have to cross twice a day?
So the amazing, wonderful thing about the public process is it isn't going to be the 5 of us making this decision. And the point is that we need to broaden the public input. And that's what the ask is, I think, tonight and right now.
So we're going to spend $12,000 to broaden public input. We can do that for free.
Yeah,
I guess that's
I'm not willing to do that.
What I'm trying to figure out is the 12,000 is to advance a NEPA study, right?
Yeah.
Not for public input necessarily. That's for an impact.
Which would be part of that process though, for NEPA.
Yeah,
It's
the public-
very part of that process.
Well, and I think what Stephanie is trying to say is that is our transportation corridor. No, Main Street isn't our transportation corridor. If you're leaving Centerville, you're probably not staying on Main Street.
Nope.
You are going to I-15, you are going to Legacy, or you are going to the frontage road. So I do think where you're saying what you really are trying to get people through Centerville. Because if you sit at our bus stops and watch the people that get on and off in Centerville, there's not a lot. I never drive by a bus stop and have a group of people standing there. Maybe one once in a while, but it's not. My other question is putting this money in this studying in during COVID. We don't know how COVID is going to affect. Is there going to be something right after COVID to where people aren't going to use public transportation anymore because it's not a safe option? I mean, I would definitely think way more about using it now than I would have a year ago. And I think that, you know, we are working at home. We don't know how COVID is going to affect.
When you say you would think more about it, what do you mean by that?
Well, I probably wouldn't get on because of health reasons, because of issues.
Yeah,
and
I wouldn't.
That's a real concern for me, is that we're looking at this right now when we don't know what our future is going to hold. I think to hold off and look at it at a different time is probably, like I said, with COVID, how many people are going to ride the mass transit? I don't know that. But I definitely don't think that Main Street is going to be in it. And I don't think our residents are going to want our Main Street in order to try to get people from Salt Lake to Ogden. If you want to come through, we would rather you come through on our frontage road rather. Stephanie's got a huge, when she talks about the schools, we've got the schools, we've got the school crossings, and you can't even schedule around them because the school times change constantly. And with COVID, they're even changing more as to when they start and when they stop. And
But that isn't, but deciding where the line goes isn't the discussion about tonight. The discussion is, do we want to have that discussion so that we can say, the bottom line is, do we want to connect? Do we want to have our transit system exist even as it does now without getting cut off in Bountiful and transferring to something else? Do we want, if we do want that connectivity, which is key to the success of transit, it's key to people actually using it. More and more people will continue to use it in the future, I believe. Then now's our chance to get in cheaper. Now's our chance to get the information. Now's our chance to get the input to say, if we do participate in this connectivity right now, then does it go along Main Street the entire way? Does it go along Main Street and then jog down to frontage road on Parish? Because the frontage road after Parish isn't a connectivity spot, right? It doesn't stay connected. So I think we're just getting past, we're going back to the Main Street dilemma, right? And right now we're just saying, do we want to take advantage of this opportunity to be a part of the current project? And if we don't, it's going to be decades down the road, millions and millions of dollars more. And in the meantime, the connectivity from Ogden to Salt Lake is going to be hampered greatly. And I know that you guys are not transit users, but I am. And that connectivity is extraordinarily important. Transit is an important part of my life and my kids' life. And to imagine that we're going to just say, well, Bountiful South gets a good system, and we'll just have to deal with, you know, transferring when we hit 5th South and make our trip take twice as long.
Okay. But your argument is based on
wait. we have another guest waiting, so we need to get to our other guest.
Can I just say
Yeah,
something
but
really
I'm
fast?
not willing to, I'm not
The
willing to.
decades and millions is not an argument, because I was told that last time, and here I am, and it's not decades and it's not millions, and they're giving us another option. And I think there will always be another opportunity to buy in, and we don't have to spend 12,000 when we don't know the future.
Let me tell you why I
with-
brought this to you, because it fit the criteria that you normally look for as council members. There's no fixed bus lines. It's faster service to Salt Lake. We're only 14 miles out of a major metropolitan hub that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the other direction to Ogden, only 20 miles. If we don't take care of our transportation needs through all options, bus, train, car, we're not going to be able to move around. We have mountains on the east and a lake on the west. We have to address these issues. We can't keep burying our heads. We have to address the issues. We have to be able to get people to move around. And post-COVID, yes, there may be less commuters, but guess what? People are still going to go to restaurants. They're still going to go see family. They're still going to go to jazz games. You're still going to go up to Ogden. I mean, it's doing a disservice to our residents that only have one car, or use transit if we don't provide options. Okay, so this is a discussion about what the future may bring and being able to move people around quicker. The 455, 470 route, with the growth that's going to happen, is not going to be a sustainable model down the road for too much longer.
That's impassioned, and I can understand where you're coming from, but also the community, we'll have this discussion again multiple times, but the community has been very adamant about what they believe they need in terms of transportation options. And anytime an option's been brought to the community where Centerville is the transit corridor connecting two other points, there was always the discussion point about what value did that bring to the community other than additional hassle, and crime and other things like that. I'm saying, sure, have the discussion again, but I would be very surprised if the community at large has changed their viewpoint on that. And the connecting people part, I think we're still too premature on that. I've sat in way too many meetings with people talking about financial models of how much employers are saving by not having their people go into an office building, how good the air quality is because we are not commuting in cars right now. I think new normal is something that we're going to have to look at, and that's going to affect what transit models look like. And so,
George, I don't disagree with you, but when you figure in the growth numbers that we know are coming, it's gonna even that out.
Yeah, but that's also a community discussion we've had for years, which is how much does the community want to continue to grow? How much are they willing to allow their density to increase? And what does Centerville look like?
That's Centerville discussion, but the growth of the communities around us are going to impact us no matter what.
I get that, but that's also where we have to look at who we're servicing. Is my responsibility to an Ogden resident who wants to get to Salt Lake, or is it to a Centerville resident who says, I really want to maintain my quality of life and I want to maintain my density and all. And if we say if we have enough people who come out and say, yeah, we're willing to say that we are one community. Well, let's just call ourselves something else. Let's just dissolve the cities and let's just be one big government organization. But Centerville residents have been very adamant, when they talked about light rail and all that, that came through with a lot of passion on it, a lot of passion. I wasn't even anywhere near politics at that point, and you could feel the reverberations of that all throughout town.
And that's the mayor's point, is that this is responsive to that. And if we're just if we're not gonna appreciate that this is responsive to those specific concerns and it fits all of our citizens' criteria, and say Centerville's closed for business, you can't come through, that's just not an option. And so we should be saying, yay, we're hearing something completely responsive to the concerns, and we're talking about improving and even reducing the existing 2 bus lines and just bringing them together.
That's where we're not. That's where the discussion is okay, do we spend $12,000 to have the community tell us exactly what they've told us in the past, if that's what the council wants to do, that's what the council wants to do. But my viewpoint is going to be, you're going to see the same responses. And in fact, now you're going to have the added, which is, so you're going to collapse the lines, make me walk further, or rely on an Uber type service to get me to the location. I just think you're gonna end up in the same place. And the Centerville's closed for business, that's pretty inflammatory, Cammy. Nobody's saying Centerville's closed for business, but you sample a bunch of residents and you're gonna get pretty much the answers, which is they believe they have the transit options they need, including the bus as it stands now. Now, if this is BRT or nothing, that's a different discussion point, but that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing this may be replacing that, but it's not an ultimatum.
So I did want to address a couple things, and then I recognize you guys have other items on your agenda. One of the things that I wanted to clarify is that when we look at long-term regional growth, that is exactly the challenge that is presented to us. We look at things strategically, and we have to get everyone's input, but at the same time, there's not an opportunity really better than this to really define and understand what the needs are in this community. And I get that the buy-in is a big ask, and I am not negating any of the challenges that you guys face right now. Long-term and short-term, UTA is addressing the COVID issue. Structurally right now, we have a mandatory mask requirement, and we have masks and hand sanitizer centers on each and every vehicle, and that's permanent. And that is, we anticipate that that's not going to change once a COVID immunization type model is out there in the masses. It is going to consistently be there. And again, one of the elements that was mentioned by the mayor is that we are geographically constrained, probably no more greater than in the Centerville area. And that presents its own challenges. And being that connectivity piece, even during the height of COVID, Centerville had riders and they had to get somewhere. And that is that connectivity, that access to opportunity that I think that Councilwoman Fillmore is talking about. And I understand, believe me, I was a brand new council member when the original discussion took place, and I was actually in, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the school. I was right there at that Centerville Elementary, I think.
Junior high.
Yeah,
Junior high, because it was too big for the elementary.
That's right, that's right. I was there at that meeting and I listened and I heard what everyone said. And believe me, I am not asking this lightly. I am coming from an understanding place. And although I am, of course, asking for this money to be able to give you better transit data, we actually do understand some of the elements that long-term people are looking at when we talk about growth. I will actually send you an invitation. We are creating, I'm working with ULI, the Urban Land Institute, to have a dialogue specific to this topic come this October. And it is actually talks about all the elements, retail, office, the whole thing. And what we're seeing right now with all of these principles, not just here in Utah, but nationwide, people are going to continue to come to Utah because of economic opportunity. Hill Air Force Base is expanding. They're also expanding the Falcon Hill area. All of these elements are coming together. And I think that this is one of those key times when you can actually spend relatively a very small sum to get a lot of data that can be utilized in the future. And again, I understand where you're coming from, and representing your particular constituents in your areas is really critical. And I do understand that. But one of the other reasons that we are, you guys are elected officials, is the goal is to also understand what is it that's going to come down the pipeline and what can we do in order to make sure that our residents are taking advantage of that. Because we do know that growth is going to come. There will be a time that people will come and say, I want to do a density development. Where should I do it? Well, North Salt Lake has really kind of taken the lead on a lot of this. And they said, we want our density only here in this one area. And this is where we're going to allow it. That strategic zoning, I think, is a critical element. And that it talks about the whole transit connectivity piece. And again, I know I've probably taken too much time, but I wanted to thank you, everyone, because it is really critical that we do take this. And that's why we are here tonight. So thanks.
Al and Beth, thank you. Thank you specifically for your presentation designed towards Centerville. And we look forward to getting further information. I love the passion everybody has. I think if you can get that out, Hal, to Brant, that would be great. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for your
Thank you,
time.
everyone.
Let's move on. Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. I feel bad that we've shorted you. We want you to take the time you need, but if we can get you back, if you don't have enough time, we will do that. We have probably, we'll go over a little bit in the council, maybe a few minutes, but can you do something in 20 minutes for us, or and then follow up later, or what do you think?
We can, Mayor. We'll be cognizant of your time, and we can do this in 20 minutes.
Thank you.
And certainly offer a time back too if you have more questions or want to discuss it further.
Yeah, and we owe you lunch or something, but we can't go out to lunch.
No, it's just very educational. We at the Water District have considered going into the transit business a couple of times. We're not going to anymore.
Good choice, I guess.
Yeah. No, we all have our issues. Thank you for the time. We'll do this quickly. My name's Tage Flint. I'm the general manager of Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. With me tonight is John Perry, our assistant general manager over special initiatives and water conservation, and that's kind of the crux of what we want to talk about tonight. Unlike transit and certainly some other public services out there, we know that our services are reaching every single resident of every single city along the Wasatch Front, and we suffer a little bit from our citizens not knowing exactly what we do and the services we provide. I'm going to do this very quickly in terms of our service area. Everyone see the slides okay?
Got them.
On the screen, great.
Yeah.
John, if you go into slide mode, that might help. Slideshow mode, that might help. Our service area is 5 counties in northern Utah. Centerville is right in the middle of Davis County. That's our Wasatch Front southern county that we serve. We serve all of Davis, all of Weber, up into Box Elder County on the Wasatch Front. And then on the Wasatch back, we serve all of Morgan County and all of Summit County on out to Wyoming border out there. So essentially the whole river system, drainage and basin of the Ogden River and the Weber River draining into the Great Salt Lake. Okay, on our next slide, we have, if we can get there.
Are you seeing it? I'm seeing the reservoirs.
We are not, I apologize. You'll know us for operating the reservoirs on the Ogden River, Pineview, Causey, certainly on the Weber side, Smith and Morehouse Reservoir way up above Oakley, and then East Canyon and Rockport reservoirs and Willard Bay and the like. So many of you have recreated on our facilities throughout. These are critical facilities. Every time you drive by or go boating or fishing on Rockport Reservoir, just know that reservoir is a main water supply facility for your drinking water into the city, as well as your irrigation water going into the city. We'll try this one more time, John.
Yeah, are you guys seeing anything?
Yep, there's some reservoir. There we go. Then
So if I go into presentation mode, Tage, it doesn't apparently doesn't show.
We'll just keep going this way. And then we are supplying most of the drinking water along the Wasatch Front. Now, I need to point out that Centerville City had some great foresight. Your forefathers looked at water supply differently than most of our cities on the Wasatch Front, and is why you have your own groundwater well filled that you do, and your drinking water system that you do, that's well operated by your operations staff. You get supplemental water from us on the drinking water side, and certainly irrigation water in the form of secondary irrigation to the citizens on the north half of your city, and still some irrigation water down west and some of the farms that are remaining. That's the case in all the counties that we serve. We're serving drinking water, secondary irrigation water, agricultural water, and just a ton of industrial water as well in all the areas, including the refineries south and west of you, and all the mineral operations up on the Great Salt Lake. So just a tremendous amount of people. We serve about 700,000 people in this area, and primarily a wholesaler of water. We retail a little bit of water on the Wasatch Front in the form of secondary water. That's where we get the name Weber Water, I believe. And that's what we mainly want to talk about tonight is the secondary water service in your area. Okay, John, is that next slide yours?
It is.
John's going to walk you through a couple of programs that we're working right now. I want to preface it by saying that we are working with Randy Randall and others on your staff to improve the secondary water service. Now, keep in mind the northern half of your city is served by the district. We've contracted the day-to-day operations of that retail system over to Benchland Irrigation. And then the southern half of your city is served by Centerville Dual Creek, a private company that has morphed into a secondary company more and more as more urban development has happened in their service area. So mainly we're talking about the area that we can do something about, which is the north half of the city. We're aware of pressure problems. We're aware of some of the infrastructure problems. We've renewed our capital outlay for replacing pipelines that are getting older. And we also have plans for reducing some demand here that will certainly help your pressure problems that we've had in some areas of the city. So with that much, John, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. I'd just like to echo what Tage said. I appreciate Brent and Randy Randall being willing to engage in conversation with us. We've had a lot of great conversations about programs and efforts and a lot of good collaboration taking place historically. So real quick, I just wanted to go, these pictures are going to be a little small, so hopefully you guys are viewing them on a large screen, but just give you guys some background on the district secondary system. So we've got a retail secondary system that provides water to about 22,000 connections along the Wasatch Front. Like Tage mentioned, Centerville is one component of that large infrastructure. That distribution system basically has about 500 miles of pipeline that we utilize to get that water from point A to point B. Within Centerville City, in our distribution system in that area, it's about 25 miles of pipeline and about 1,600 connections. Okay, that 500 miles of pipeline is basically broken down into this type of distribution system. And I don't know if you can see I can't even see my mouse, but Centerville City's distribution system is located about in the middle of that schematic there. And if you look at it closely, which I don't expect you to do, there's about 6 different operating zones or pressure zones that are capable of being operated within the Centerville system. A large portion of the water that's delivered to that area comes out of the Centerville Reservoir, although there is a dedicated turnout off of the Davis Aqueduct that the system pulls from. So like we mentioned, Tage referenced before, the district secondary service area within Centerville city limits is kind of that area on the north side of like 1100 north and kind of east of the freeway there. And you can see that depicted in this image on the left with all those balloon poly lines that are going through, depicting lines that are within that service area. On the right-hand side, you can see where we've identified turnouts on our secondary system, and each one of those dots, makes up the 1,600 connections that we've been discussing. So real quick, I believe the premise of this conversation was to discuss conservation programs and efforts that we can collaboratively work on to make sure that we're doing efficiently delivering water, and we've got a service distribution system that's operating at a level of service that's acceptable to the residents into the district in Centerville City. So when we talk about water usage, we've got the obvious indoor water usage, washing hands, washing dishes, bathing, laundry, things to that effect. But we've also got the outdoor irrigation landscaping, that takes place. I included a table right here that kind of gives you an idea of range of gallons that were used, per minute or total cycles as you have different applications of water. And really what I want to demonstrate on this table right here is that if you look at all those different uses of water, right, brushing your teeth, about 1 gallon, 2.5 gallons of water, flushing a toilet, anywhere from 1.3 to 7 gallons, washing a car, 100 gallons, bathing, 30 to 50 gallons. Those are all pretty low volumes of water that are associated with indoor water use. So we can do a lot of things, and we do a lot of things to engage the public in indoor water conservation measures. But the bang for the buck really is limited when you talk about those applications. If you look at that last line item on that table, watering a 1/4 acre lawn. So every time somebody flips that switch to have the irrigation cycle work, we're typically seeing about 3,000 gallons of water be put out onto that lawn. So really, when we talk about conservation efforts and programs, the biggest bang for the buck is programs that are specific to the outdoor irrigation and what we can do to incentivize more efficient applications or changes in those behaviors. So as we go down the district,
John,
go ahead.
John, if I may quickly, and if you're wondering why we focus so much on this, it's for the obvious reasons John just pointed out, plus the fact that we measure per capita use of water throughout the state, and do that carefully every single year. The Davis County and Weber County areas have some of the highest per capita use of water in the entire state, and I bet you can guess why. The secondary water was a great concept. It's using the same exact water that we use for our source water for drinking water, and it was untreated and coming to our lawns and gardens. It's almost a cultural expectation of most of our citizens to have secondary water in this area. That's the good news. The bad news is their per capita use is just off the charts. It's kind of like the Chuckarama of water supply, right? They pay one time a year and then they just use absolutely as much as they can possibly use. And that's driven our per capita use just sky high. We have many residences in Davis County that can literally grow rice with the amount of water they put on their landscapes. And so you can see again why we're focusing on this secondary water.
Absolutely. We'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a few slides here. But just to give you guys an idea, the city an idea of what the district's currently engaged in as far as conservation programs, here's kind of a list. Public education. The district is actively engaged in landscaping classes and education efforts with our customers in the form of 30 to 40 classes that we host on our facility every year. Ranging from topics to pruning fruit trees to doing different things with your landscape that require lesser volumes of water. Now with the COVID pandemic, those classes have largely transitioned to online webinars that we've continued to have and have pretty good turnout. Codes and standards, we continue to work with municipalities at the state level to make sure that any codes that we can get within building permitting and things like that are incorporating water efficiency standards. Hoping we get out there and we actively engage in water waste restrictions, water distribution system improvements. We want to make sure that our system's operating at a high level, that we're not losing water in the form of leaks or non-revenue water, and we understand where the water's going. Metering water use, like Tage referenced, historically, the secondary water use in our retail secondary system hasn't been metered, largely due to lack in technology being available to meter the secondary water with its water quality and things like that. Irrigation efficiency improvements, existing home landscape changes, toilet replacement, rebates, landscape ordinances, and things like that. So when we go on and we talk about landscape ordinances, like I mentioned before, the bang for the buck is in getting those changes in the outdoor water use. We look at the water usage of the residents within our retail secondary service area, and I think statewide, about 60% of Utah's water is used outside. So a typical Utah household that's using water 12 months of the year will see about 60 to 70%, and I've seen it as high as 80% in some of the analyses that we've done, are dumping that water during those irrigation months, the April through October, and largely in July and August. So as we make improvements in the application of water during those months, that's where we're going to see the biggest bang for our buck. And you look at it, and I've got some charts on the next sheet here, and we'll just go to those. But if you look at that graph on the far right, so this is one of our metering groups that's been in the ground since about 2012. If you look at that y-axis, we're tracking kind of the volume, the inches of water used above the estimated need. Now, estimated need is calculated on an annual basis utilizing max and min temperatures on a daily interval, solar radiation, and things like that. That first year that we get usage data from our meter customers for this particular group, they were using 18 inches above what they should. So typically our ET values are around 30 inches of water. They were putting down about 50 inches of water. where the math and kind of the irrigation and everything, Hargrave's equation with the ET values would have them using close to 30. You can see as they start engaging in these educational outreach programs that the district has, there's a pretty significant drop. You go from 18 inches that first year, they start getting their monthly usage statements, which are depicted by that middle image there. We start giving them a goal to work towards, and it drops. And you can see that drop is representative by going from about 18 inches of over watering down to about 8 on average. And that's a pretty big drop. If you look at that 18 inches, that's about 30 gallons of water per square foot being put down on grass. You drop that 10 inches and you've just eliminated about 7 or 8 gallons of that 30 gallon number that we just threw out there. So as these meters go in, we get a huge opportunity to engage with our customers, educate them on the volume of water that's being used, because in large part, nobody understands, right? They don't know that when they put that sprinkling system on and have it run through a cycle, that every hour they're putting 1,000 to 1,500 gallons of water down. And so it is eye-opening when they get these statements and they know that they're watering for about 5 hours every other day, the volume of water that's associated with that usage, and the fact that most of the time it's not needed, right? There's improvements that can be made to really get that water usage down. And then on the far left, there's another tool that we make available to these users, which is in the form of the customer portal. So the monthly usage statement, that gives them the volume of water they use that month. It gives them a goal to strive to meet in the form of that green bar on that graph. And then on the left, you can see that they can get in there on the customer portal and actually see their hourly usage and see what they did the day before and see what the ET values are doing and tracking based on weather data that's pulled from a weather station in close proximity to them. So finally, as we talk about, making landscape changes and trying to get people to be more efficient with their use, really what it comes down to is there's 2 components. There's educating the end user on how they can be more efficient with their application of their water. And then there's encouraging or incentivizing them to make landscape changes that actually require less water. And as we do those 2 things, you can see pretty significant reductions in water usage. And why that should interest the city and pretty much all water users is that as we engage in these opportunities, these activities, and these programs, you see an increased level of service made available in the existing distribution system. So what I've done right here is just got a quick little diagram that kind of demonstrates this fact. If we assume that you've got a resident somewhere in Centerville City that during the middle of the day when no water is being used, because of the difference in elevation between the reservoir and their location, they'd have about 100 pounds of pressure available to them. As you start seeing that usage increase, so let's say that 6,700 gallons per minute is what we see peak day in July. That 100 PSI drops to 55 PSI. So we lose 45 pounds of pressure because of that dramatic flow that's being drawn through the system. If we cut that in half to 3350, your pressure only goes to 88 PSI. And so as we see these reductions in water usage and more efficient applications, the existing system is able to provide a higher level of service just as a result of those efforts. And so I guess what we'd like to engage, and like I said, we really appreciate Randy Randall and Brant being willing to engage in conversations with us. But what we'd like to do is basically vocalize our thankfulness for you guys' willingness to support our meter program, that we're looking to go out and install about 1,600 meters on our secondary users in the Centerville area starting this fall. And we're going to accelerate that program to hopefully get that done this year, and then continue to work with you guys on any landscape ordinance changes that we can make that would incentivize or encourage people to do better with their landscapings moving forward. And with that, I think we can have any questions or dialogue that you guys would like to.
So I've bought us about 10 minutes. We have some advancement for some officers, which is very important with our city council meeting. But I've let our chief know we're a little bit behind. But so I would like to hear some input from council and Randy Randall, if there's anything. Very good presentation. Thank you so much. As a kid, I did a lot of ski runs along Rockport Reservoir as a teenager and a 20-year-old. Had no idea at that point in time how critical that reservoir was for real needs, such as irrigation and drinking. So questions, council? Any comments, Randy or others?
I was going to say where, Tammy and I might differ a little bit on transportation policy. I think we're pretty much the same when it comes to park strips and wanting to get rid of those as quickly as we can. Have you seen success in other communities and real numbers we can point to say this is what a parking strip wastes and how much we're going to save if we can do something about it?
Yeah, so I think the average park strip, if you were to convert that over to a water efficient application, you're looking to save, 8 to 10,000 gallons of water a year. The park strips, they're generally pretty narrow, and they're not, on a typical lot, they're about 5 feet wide and, 80 or so feet long. And so that's generally what we see, because in most applications, they're not removing all of the turf and just putting down xeriscape or things that require no water. There might be some bushes or some more water efficient plantings that are being put in there. So it's typically in that 8 to 10,000 gallons of the studies that I've seen. And I think that Jordan Valley, that's got a pretty active park strip flipping program going, that's the numbers that they've seen.
And I'll add to that, as John pointed out on one of the slides, the reaction we're getting from the public who have meters put in their secondary systems for the first time in the time that they've lived there is astounding. We're averaging well over 20% savings on year 2 from just simply educating them better on what they're using. They can look on an hourly basis and see how much they're consuming on the portal. It's just one of those cases where a lot more information is getting a lot better result in how people use this resource. John, you can probably take those slides down if you want.
Let me do that.
So how does someone apply for the credit for eliminating or going to a xeriscape on your parking strip?
So right now, that program is available in Salt Lake County, and we've basically engaged in pilot programs with developers to hit those new constructions and new developments right off the bat, just because we are directing a large portion of our conservation efforts and monies to the installation of secondary meters. Because as we go and do the cost benefit analysis, the meters are where we're seeing the biggest bang for our buck as far as conservation is concerned. So right now, the incentives that we would have is that we would have landscape classes available here at the district to educate them on what could work in their park strips. And then obviously the meters to help educate them just on the water savings that are available and the efficient application of water. But the rebates that we do have available, you'd find on Utah Water Savers at weaverbasin.com, and they're in the form of smart controller rebates and toilet replacements.
And what do you plan on charging? It wouldn't be the same rate as the treated water.
Yeah, for secondary water.
Right.
Right. So the customers so the northern half of your city that we serve now are paying a one-time a year fee for their water service on the outdoor applications. And what we're proposing here is, and the way we did that is we allocated X amount of gallons per year to each one of the lots, depending on the lot size. And what we would do with these meters then is not necessarily charge them by the gallon, because we have a contractual relationship that's different. What we would do instead is track them against their annual allocation. Once they get starting to use more than their percentage of their allocation than the percentage of the year that's gone by, we'll start alerting them of their need to cut back or having to pay more money than they've paid already for additional water beyond their allocation. Does that make sense? So the meters will be done differently than their culinary meters from the city, which charge by the gallon. These will be measuring against what we've allocated per lot.
And so what's the phasing approach on those meters going in? What year and when do you intend?
Yeah,
schedule?
We've been working with your city manager and public works manager to come to a conclusion on that. We thought we are doing these meters at about 1,000 meters per year in our retail system, but we've received input from your management that says it would be nice if we just did all of these as quickly as possible, so you don't have neighbors across the street from each other, one being metered and one not being metered. And to that end, Councilman, we would like to try to do this all in 1 year and just get them in and be done with it.
So you put them in and then you have what, an echo meter type report you're getting back to the individual subscribers. Right. And how long does that stay in before you actually change the billing model?
Right. So two ways to communicate with them. One is real time on the portal. These meters will communicate it through towers and radio signals, and you can look an hour backwards and see how much you used an hour backwards and beyond. Second is, right now we're giving them a monthly mailing showing them their monthly use compared to many other standards. Moving forward, we'll likely still put the premium on charging them when they go over their annual allocation. And that's where the incentive is going to come to stay under their allocation, is not be charged that premium once they go over. They're fairly generous allocations. Most people with a reasonable attentiveness can stay under it every year.
You haven't been charged anything yet, have you, Tage, anywhere? This is something you're doing into the future?
Yeah, we have a pilot program right now, Randy, that's just starting this last month, of notifying folks that they have to curb their use and come in and get a performance plan from now to the end of the year, or we will start charging them. So to date, we've never charged anyone an overreach. We wanted to get to a critical mass of customers that have meters before we started something like that. But we're about there.
What percentage of your customers overall are metered at this point?
John, we're just over half now.
We're quickly approaching half. So we estimate we've got about 22,000 connections and we're sitting at about 10,000.
Okay.
And you're going to eventually do the whole district, and other districts are going to be required to do that as well. So it's not just.
Yeah. So, right, Randy. So yes, we plan over the next half dozen years being done with ours throughout the 3 counties. The state law now requires all new secondary connections going in must have a meter placed in with it. And that would include anyone within your city as well. So going forward, it will be taken care of. It's that retroactive retrofitting that's going to be difficult and expensive.
We're very supportive of the metering. We think we've watched what Weber Basin's been doing over the last 5 years or so, and have seen a great reduction in their flows. And we think it'll be helpful here as well.
One more note, we're working with the League of Cities and Towns and trying to come up with a series of ordinances that the cities could find acceptable and ones that the citizens could accept on a higher level. And we're just initiating that program right now. We'd love your involvement, and we'll be coming back to you with the results of that in the next year, hoping that you could work with us. The land use jurisdiction resides with the city. It does not reside with the water district, and we understand that completely. And we'll need your help in form of ordinances going forward, especially on new development, but even on existing development, to try to curb our water use some. It'll help your pressures throughout the city. It'll save a natural resource that's finite, and I think in the end, no one will know the difference in terms of landscape.
This is Corey. I'm just listening in as the planner. I think I've read this little model ordinance. I have some concerns about it on the specifics, but I'm sure the league will heavily weigh in on that.
They will.
I think once you're probably at that draft, there's some, depending on how it plays out, there are some significant policy issues for the council to consider. And I don't know where the legislative body here would land on that, but yeah, I'd like to see what the Utah League of Cities and Towns done, because I think the model ordinance is great as an initial draft, but I do think it has some land use challenges with the state.
Yeah, we agree, Corey, and that's exactly what it is a rough draft. And we decided we ought to go straight at the league with this, so we get plenty of input before we come back out with a recommendation that we take directly to the council. You got a good point.
Any other questions for Tage and John? Tage and John, thank you so much for your presentation. I was just in the
I do have one more, Clark. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Is Dual Creek going to be doing a parallel program?
We're not aware that they will. We wholesale water to them for the last half of their season, usually after the creeks run dry or run down. We'll provide some incentive for them in the long run, and we'll certainly help them as fast as they want to go. We can help them with all the data, all the designs. They wouldn't have to reinvent anything, but it's a matter of cost for them, as it is for many of these small companies. And so the answer is they will not be going nearly as fast as we are. I'm quite sure of that. And the question will be, ultimately, will they be required to do this with the city? Will they seek state funding, which some is available, to help them with those costs? And we can help with all those, either application for state money to help them with the costs, design, or even using our communication towers for their signals. All that kind of stuff we're going to offer up free of charge to them if they'd like to proceed.
They are replacing they're not replacing anything yet, but they are, all their new is being put in with meters up front right now as well.
At Centerville Dual Creek, that's correct.
Yes.
Wonderful. Very good report. Thank you very much. It's very interesting, something that we haven't hit very often, but is very critical when you talk water. I just opened up one of your reports today at the mayor's office and read through those updates that you send out to you. They're very well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to the council. We'll be back to talk some more. If you have questions in the meantime, you're welcome to call me anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
You too. Council, do you need 2 or 3 minutes, or are you ready to move right in?
2 or 3 minutes would be nice.
Okay, let's look to get back then. I got 7:12. Let's get back and start 7:15. I will wait for each picture to pop up or so I can do a roll call.
Here.
Hey, Lisa gave us a roll call.
Good job,
Welcome, Lisa.
Good to be here.
Present.
Present.
Wonderful. Welcome to the, I know 2 or 3 minutes, probably too quick, but if I said 5 or 10, then it'd be 15. So 2 or 3, we did well. We did it about 5. Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting of August 18th, being held by Zoom. We are a little bit late in getting started, but that's not because we were goofing around. We were having transportation and water discussions, and water is one of our basic needs. And so it was pretty critical that we have that discussion. But we were excited for what we have on our agenda tonight and the issues that we'll discuss. So roll call, Councilman Ince.
Present.
Councilwoman Fillmore.
I am present.
Councilwoman Ivy.
Unmute, Steph.
Councilman McEwen.
Present.
And Councilwoman Meekum. I could see that Councilwoman Ivy is here and Councilwoman Meekum, you're here, but so
Here, sorry.
they're all good. Okay. We'll begin with the prayer of thought, and that will be by myself, and I will offer prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're very grateful as an opportunity to meet as elected officials and a staff of Centerville City and neighbors and friends, and for this wonderful, beautiful process that we are allowed to participate in and that we can participate in. That we have an opportunity to hear from the citizens and to have these freedoms that we have. We're mindful that we're in a difficult situation right now in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. We're grateful for the safety and the health that we have experienced so far. Help us to continue to take those measures to make sure that our citizens are taken care of. Help those that are affected by this sickness or any other sickness because of this, that they may be able to have thy blessings with them. We're grateful once again for these freedoms we have. We're grateful for the government that we have. We're grateful for those that serve and protect us. And we're grateful for all our family and friends as well too. And bless each one of our residents with the blessings that they need. And this we say in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I get to do double duty tonight, I guess. So next thing is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is open session. This is anything that that member of the public would like to bring to our attention or just discuss. So give you about 2 to 3 minutes. Anybody that wants to chime in. Here on the screen is a dial-up number as well as a meeting ID number and a passcode. So I'll give it a minute or so and let Leah inform me if anybody's called in or not. Maybe 30 seconds, we'll see. Seeing that there appears to be no one that's wants to say anything on the open session, we will close that open session. We'll move on to the business of the meeting. And we're excited for the first item that we have here, police rank advancements recognition. We have our police chief with us. And Chief, we'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the support that we received from all of you. With COVID-19 and everything that's been going on, we haven't had a chance to kind of present some of our rank advancements in the last 6 months or so that we've had. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and present those now. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen here. Let's see here. Basic advanced. All right. So I'm going to try to get to my home screen. I'm not sure if you can see that at all.
We can see you had a great trip to the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
All right. So first up is Detective Master Officer Mark Taggart. In January of 2020, Sergeant Jake Alexander and Lieutenant Zan Robinson submitted letters of recommendation for Mark Taggart to be considered for promotion to Master Officer. After receiving these recommendations, I met with Detective Taggart and reviewed his qualifications and determined that he met all of the requirements and approved this promotion. In May of this year, Mark Taggart's Sergeant, Alan Ackerson, advised that Mark Taggart qualified for the designation of Detective 2. Master Officer Taggart has been a detective for 2 years. He is trained in forensic interviewing, basic and advanced crime scene investigation, and completed training on homicide investigation. Master Officer Taggart started at Centerville Police Department in September of 2012. Prior to coming to Centerville, Mark worked for 7 years as a corrections officer at the Davis County Sheriff's Office in the jail. Mark Taggart holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Weber State in criminal justice and law enforcement, and he is a very valuable member of our department. Just for everyone's information, he is homegrown from Centerville and very much an asset to our department. So let's go back to my nice screen here again with the ocean, and we'll go to Detective Davis. So this is David Davis. In March of this year, I received a letter of recommendation from Sergeant Jake Alexander endorsing Detective Davis for the designation of Detective 2. So as you can see, we have different job descriptions. We'll typically start out at Police Officer 1 for officers coming on board that have no prior experience. And then they work their way up through the ranks, Police Officer 1, 2, 3. And then we have kind of a new designation of Master Officer, which is a very difficult level to reach. And then Sergeant would be above that. And then in the detective position, or the detective division, we have Detective 1 and Detective 2. In order to qualify for Detective 1 and Detective 2, they have to reach certain benchmarks of training and recommendation from their sergeant. I evaluated Detective Davis's qualifications and compared those against the job description and found that Detective Davis had met all the requirements for this position. On March 10th, Detective Davis was classified as Detective 2, and I would like to recognize him for his hard work and diligence in obtaining this. Detective Davis has been working extremely hard on a very large caseload, doing some amazing work in solving and closing many cases. Detective Davis has worked for Centerville Police Department since February 2015. Previously, he worked for Davis County Sheriff's Office as a correctional officer for over 5 years and with Hillsborough County Department of Corrections in New Hampshire for 1.5 years. Detective Davis was a DARE officer with our department prior to becoming a case officer or a case detective. Detective David Davis is a decorated U.S. Air Force veteran serving for 6 years, While doing so, he served in combat theaters in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And incidentally, he had a mortar round go off in very close proximity to him. He was hit by shrapnel, and his flak jacket saved his life. So I want to recognize Detective Davis achieving Detective 2 designation. So now we'll move to Holly Combs. In April of this year, Sergeant Alexander submitted a letter of recommendation to me advising that Holly Combs met all qualifications for Detective 1. I reviewed these qualifications and compared them with the job description and agreed to this. Detective Combs is currently assigned as a DARE SRO, so that's School Resource Officer, for the department, and is assigned to the Detective Division as a Detective 1. So we assign our DARE SROs to the Detective Division, working in there, working cases and so forth when they're able to. But they still have to reach certain benchmarks to receive the designation as a Detective 1. Prior to coming to work at Centerville Police Department, Holly worked for both the Utah and Idaho divisions of adult parole and probation for a combination of 7 years doing that. She was hired by us in 2018, and so now she has 9 years of law enforcement experience. Detective Combs has completed forensic interviewing, basic and advanced crime scene investigation, and the DARE school, which is a pretty rigorous school, I might add. Detective Combs has been very valuable to the Detective Division while also working in the schools teaching the DARE curriculum. We've had a lot of praise from the schools in reference to how she's performing there in the schools. So now I'm going to go to Master Officer / Sergeant Jeremy Brown. Jeremy Brown has the distinction of being the first officer to qualify for and be promoted to Master Officer, which occurred in August of 2019. At that time, Jeremy was assigned to the Detective Division and had qualified as a Detective 2. In April of this year, Jeremy tested for the sergeant position vacated by the retirement of Sergeant Jake Alexander. At the conclusion of this testing process, Jeremy came out with the highest amount of points and was promoted to sergeant on May 3rd, 2020. Sergeant Brown has excelled in every position he has served in and has many great qualifications to show for it. Sergeant Brown holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Weber State and is currently working towards his master's degree in criminal justice. And he told me today he's got 5 more classes and he'll be done with that. Jeremy is a drug recognition expert instructor. He is a state peace officer standard and training instructor. He is trained in forensic interviewing, basic and advanced crime scene investigation. He's a certified phlebotomist. He is also a crime scene investigator for the medical examiner's office. So when he's not doing his work for his master's degree, he's not on call as a sergeant here or working here, he is possibly on a death scene somewhere in Davis, Weber, I think Morgan counties. Formerly, Jeremy worked patrol for 6 years. He worked as a DARE SRO officer for 3 years, a sex crimes detective for 3 years, and then prior to coming to Centerville, Jeremy worked for West Bountiful as a patrol officer for 3 years. So now we're going to move to Cale Jackson. Cale Jackson is probably one of our top performers out there in patrol. He's extremely proactive, does a great job, is very, very good with people. Officer Cale Jackson is currently a police officer 3. He was hired by Centerville Police Department in May of 2014. Prior to working for Centerville, he worked for Davis County Sheriff's Office as a correctional officer for 10 years. He was also reserve officer for Ogden Police Department before that. Cale is currently our use of force instructor, so he's a state certified post instructor. and teaches specifically our TASER and OC training, and then also less lethal. And he is currently assigned as a patrol officer. With the retirement of Sergeant Alexander, it did open up a detective position in the detective division. And after going through the standard process that we have in place for that selection, Officer Jackson was selected to fill that position in the detective division. We have not filled that yet because we wanted to get Officer James Hall back from deployment so that we don't leave patrol understaffed until he's back to full duty. Then we'll move him over, it should be later on this month. All right, and then Sean McWilliams. In February this year, I received letters of recommendation from Sergeants Dingman and Ackerson for Officer Williams to be promoted to Police Officer 3. I reviewed Officer McWilliams' qualifications and compared them to the job description and agreed to make this promotion. Sean was hired by Centerville Police Department in March of 2017. Prior to working for Centerville, he worked for Utah Patrol as a trooper for 6 years. And prior to that, he worked for Kansas State Patrol for 5 years. Officer McWilliams has specialized training in public order and was a member of the Utah Department of Public Safety Public Protection Unit, and also served on Utah Patrol's DUI squad. Sean has received many accommodations throughout his career and recently was recognized by the Utah Department of Public Safety for saving the lives of 2 teenage boys who were trapped in a burning car. This happened down on Legacy Highway. And the car was overturned. It was involved in a head-on collision, and he was able to pull those 2 young men out of the car, saving their lives. We are very pleased to have Officer McWilliams serving with our department. He's a great asset to us, and besides that, he's a lot of fun to have around. And then finally, I just wanted to bring up James Hall here. He's been with us for a year, and he has been doing just outstanding. The problem is that, well, I guess it's a problem for us, but it's good for the United States of America. He was deployed. He is reserved with the U.S. Air Force stationed at Hill Air Force Base. And he received orders for deployment to the Middle East. He left here last part of January. He is back home now, but he's happy. He had to go through a COVID 14-day quarantine and then also an R&R that the military requires. He's very anxious to get back to work. In fact, we've had to kind of govern him a little bit because he wants to just jump in, and we got to tell him not quite yet because he's got to fulfill the requirements the military's given him. But we hope to have him back on duty on the 24th of this month. So anyway, just a big shout out to my officers and staff. We've got just an excellent team here, and wanted to recognize these fine individuals for their recent accomplishments. So thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
And I'll stop sharing.
Chief, thank you so much. It looks like Officer Coombs may be with us. Looking at, and thank you. Those of you that aren't with us, thank you so much. Thanks for the great work.
I think most of them are watching on YouTube.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Can I call for a standing ovation then?
I think something like that's very appropriate. So let's stand and give them claps for a few seconds.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wish we could do that sort of thing in person.
Yes.
It's not quite the same on the screen, but we appreciate our officers so much.
Yeah, these are the type of things that you miss in person, getting the community to see it, family to see it for them, friends. But we're glad that we could get it done and not have to delay it further, because it sounds like, Chief, that they've been happening over months. Time. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda. This is item that was tabled from 4 weeks ago. This is the zoning map amendment for Dave's Complete Auto. Lisa Romney, I have a question for you. We did a public hearing then. Is this a public hearing matter again, or Brent? Did we determine to open it to public hearing again?
I can't remember if you closed it last time, but we do have it noticed as a public hearing, so we might.
Okay, so no problem. So I should go ahead and open it to a public hearing again, right?
I'd say, Mr. Mayor, we did leave the public hearing open during the time, and we have not received any comments since the last city council meeting. I would dare say it is open, but if you want to open it again, just to make sure, that's okay too.
Okay, thank you. So we had presentation by our Community Development Director, Corey Snyder. We had the applicant, Dave Bell, as well to respond. We had opened it to a public hearing. I suppose at this point in time, then if the public hearing is still open, we could just go with comments from the public, then come back to council input and questions, further questions for Corey Snyder and Dave Bell. Unless anybody has objection to that, then I will just say that the public hearing continues to be open. We did receive some comments from the public that should be in your packet in the form of letters. So we welcome further comments. The public hearing is open for the zoning map amendment regarding today's Complete Auto. For the public, you have a dial-in number on the screen. You have a meeting ID number with the passcode as well too. So it is now open, and we'll give it a few moments to see if comments come in. I'm not seeing or hearing that any comments are coming in. Any further comments from the public? Leah, am I correct with that?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So if that's the case, then I will close the public hearing. The public hearing is now closed, and we will come back to any further. First off, I will open it to any further comments from Corey, or any further comments from Dave. Corey, do you have anything further? Dave, anything further before I have the council ask questions? Corey, you first.
I did not prepare anything. Was not asked to, so unless you
Okay.
have questions, I'll be here and give Mr. Bell his, it's his application, so give him the last effort.
Dave Bell, you have the opportunity to present anything further before council asks questions.
I'd like to. First off, I'd like to thank them individually. You know, I thank them individually, but as a group, I appreciate their time. I was able to, in the last couple of weeks, speak to each one of them. And I appreciate, what I took away from that was a greater appreciation for, you know, the difficulty in your decision. I don't often try to see another person's side as I have on this. I appreciate your work on this. I am as clueless as I could be about what's going to probably happen here. I would, again, like to just ask you, as a property owner, this 1/3 of an acre is all I'm asking for to add to the existing site. And the revenue, the additional revenue, will most likely we're right about 2.5 million this year, but with the addition, our pro forma shows it will be close to 4 million within 1.5 to 2 years. That's a substantial tax revenue addition for the city for basically a third of an acre of a piece of property I've owned for 20 years. Please consider that, as I know you have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dave, so much. So council, questions or input for either the applicant, Dave, or for staff? If not, I guess we're looking for I'm looking for a motion on it then.
Someone else is going to go, huh?
It is with a, I'm not sure what the proper format is for this, because I would really like to approve this, but because of the ramifications that are attached, I would make a motion that we decline the rezoning application of the property to commercial very high of 2020-08, excuse me.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
With that motion, if we're doing a denial, we need to have some findings that go along with that. Bill, do you have findings that you're proposing?
Sure, I can add some findings to it. The findings that I have is that the automatic uses that are provided to the property under commercial very high are incompatible with the proximity to the residential low, which it would be adjacent, the residential low and the residential medium that it would be adjacent to. And I don't think that they are conducive to those properties.
Do we lose Stephanie? I think so.
Yeah, she seems to be still.
Sorry.
There she is.
Up a little.
So Councilman Ince has presented a motion that was seconded. He reported some findings. The back his motion. So if there's not further discussion, then I guess I'm looking at a roll call vote.
Mayor, to be clear, as far as the background of my thinking on the vote that I'm going to make, being in the same boat as Bill, that it's one of those difficult calls. But I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion and just add some additional findings.
I would consider that friendly.
Okay, so I'd like our findings.
Well, Councilman, that's a withdrawal of your motion for an amendment motion, right?
Well,
I thought you was just adding findings.
Okay.
I'll just throw out this motion to amend, and then we can vote on the motion to amend, and then we can vote on the motion that's on the table. Is that okay?
Sure.
I would just like us to refer to the zoning code and the general plan that I think that we've studied and used as our basis for this decision. So I'd like us to refer to the fact that this zone map amendment fails to meet the approval standards of the Centerville Zoning Code 12.21.080 as supported by the listed findings. The requested zone map amendment is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the city's general plan for the subject area as set forth in the Southwest Neighborhood Plan, section 12-480-1 of the general plan. Specifically, the Southwest Neighborhood Plan indicates that the area from 500 West to the commercial area located along the frontage road Porter Lane area may be appropriately developed with low to medium density residential. In addition, the plan encourages the use of planned development type multifamily uses to act as a buffer between the commercial uses to the west and single family use areas farther east into the neighborhood from 400 West to Main Street. And that's referring to section 12-480-1.a. The Southwest Neighborhood Plan anticipates low to medium residential uses as the land use pattern from east to west until the pattern meets the commercial area along the frontage road. The existing undeveloped parcel subject to the zone map amendment is currently zoned residential medium and functions as a transitional buffer area between the commercial along the frontage road and the medium density development of the Porter Walton townhomes to the east. The requested zone map amendment would encroach into and create a knuckle of commercial very high properties surrounded by residential agricultural properties on three sides, reducing the effectiveness of the residential buffer and increasing the proximity and intensity of the commercial uses to the existing residential development to the east. The requested zone map amendment is not harmonious with the overall character of the existing development in the vicinity of the property, as it would create the encroachment of commercial uses further to the east and in closer proximity to existing residential development, thereby reducing that residential buffer. The requested zone map amendment will adversely affect adjacent residential properties to the east by increasing the proximity and intensity of commercial uses to the existing residential development and will leave an oddly shaped parcel for future development. Based on the decision-making standards for legislative decisions as set forth in Centerville Zoning Code 12.21.060, the requested zone map amendment does not reasonably promote the public interest, fails to conserve property values of adjacent residential properties, and creates incompatible development with the encroachment of commercial uses in the residential buffer. And Leah, I can get those to you in writing.
And I will second your amendment. That's a pretty strong list.
That is.
Yeah, that was very well done. Thank you.
All right, we have a amended a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Then we'll take a roll call vote, and I'm going from who I see first. Councilwoman Ivy.
Aye.
Councilman Ince.
Aye.
Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
Councilwoman Meekum. Unmute.
Aye.
Did you say aye?
Yes.
Okay, and Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passes 5-0. I guess we need to vote about the original motion too.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go first with Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Ivy.
Aye.
And Councilman Ince.
Aye.
And that motion passes 5-0. It's been a hard decision. We thank you, everyone, for the time that you put into it. We thank you for being considerate of Mr. Bell as well as all our citizens. And thanks for the time that you put in on it. All right, item number 3. This is Centerville Municipal Code Amendment to campfires and burning. Now, we have our chief with us on this one. I was in a fire district meeting yesterday, so Chief, I'm thrilled because you can do a part of my mayor's report for me tonight. And what was something that we spent the most time on is what he wants to present and go with you tonight. So Chief Bassett, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's good to see you all, I guess remotely. It's kind of our new normal, unfortunately. What is before you this evening? Let me just give you a little background. You're all aware we're coming up on the year mark of gun range fire. Since gun range fire took place, which was a fire caused by an unattended campfire, I've been working with the Forest Service and with our county commissioners on a campfire restriction for Ward Canyon. And as I was working through that motion, Farmington City said we would love to join in on this if you could take us along and try to get a restriction for the canyon. So getting a restriction on the Forest Service is fairly hard. We've had numerous meetings. A lot of good people have been working hard on this project. And what has taken place through all the discussions is the Forest Service has issued a new fire restriction for Farmington Canyon and Ward Canyon, which is the canyon above the B in Bountiful. And that restriction has been supported by a county ordinance. Now, the restriction is that there cannot be a campfire within 600 feet of a roadway or motorized trail. Let me start that again. From the Forest Service, their new restriction is there can be no campfires or ignition sources within 600 feet of either side of a roadway on Forest Service property in Farmington and Ward Canyon. Initially, let me just explain a little bit of feedback here that I worked on. As we looked at these fires, Mill Creek Canyon had the same problem that we currently have today in Ward Canyon. And as I worked with officials from the state and officials from the Forest Service on the federal side, Mill Creek Canyon received a restriction of a half-mile restriction, and that's a permanent restriction in Mill Creek. That has resolved all of their problems in that canyon. And so I started down the road of a half-mile, and over time working with the federal partners, there's a lot of questions about where their land stops and starts. They need to have it surveyed properly. A lot of things need to take place. So as we worked with the Forest Service and the county commissioners, we came up with the 600 feet notice, which basically means our most significant problem with campfires in Centerville, in Bountiful, are people driving along the dirt road, stopping, having a fire, and then going on their way. That's where majority of our problems occur. So the Forest Service passed a restriction that is 600 feet from either side of the roadway. The county commissioners passed a supporting ordinance to support the Forest Service, which is no campfires or any ignition sources or open burning within a half-mile of any structure and 600 feet on either side of the roadway in Farmington and Ward Canyon. That has passed as well. And now with those two new ordinances supporting the campfire restrictions along our mountain wildland interface area, I am coming to the cities of Centerville, Bountiful, and North Salt Lake, seeking your support in passing a ordinance on the city side of this with the restriction of a half-mile from any structure and a half-mile from any motorized road or trail. During our discussions with the county, we had to come to this negotiation with the Forest Service. I am going to continue to press forward with the Forest Service to enhance their restriction to a half-mile, and they know that. They are ready to work with us and move forward. This is our first step in trying to manage our forest system and keep it as safe as an environment as possible. Just to clarify, as of last Friday, the Forest Service has issued a superseding notice that is a complete ban of any fire or any ignition source on the forest until September 30th because of our extreme fire danger that we are currently in. Once that order does come off, then the order that was just approved by them will go back into place. So we've been very happy with the success we've received with the Forest Service and with the county officials. And that's what we're bringing to you tonight is a supporting ordinance on campfires. You will notice that we do have a window in there through the winter where it would be allowed. So for our recreation folks or a lot of scout groups, young men's groups who go up on the hill and camp in the winter, they will still be allowed to do that. But from April 1st to October 31st, they will be not, which is fire season. And that's really what we're looking at. I do want to give thanks to Chief Child and to Lisa. We worked on this collectively with Casey Vorwaller, my fire marshal, to make sure everyone had say into what we were trying to achieve and try to really protect our mountain from these unattended campfires. So far this year, we are at 30 unattended campfires so far this year in between Centerville and Ward Canyon. So it is not something that is stopping. So we believe this new restriction will help that. This new ordinance will support it. I was in a conference call with the Forest Service today, and we, the fire department, are going to start installing all the new signs to assist the Forest Service in getting the information out. I will say that once the county approved their new ordinance, I have already received numerous phone calls to my office. I've met with residents in person who are excited and supportive of the new ordinances by the county and by the Forest Service because it's been a long time coming, something that they've been facing for a long time. So I'll leave that with the council, and I'm happy to answer any questions from anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we had a great discussion yesterday. I had input and the other mayors had input to the cities that it's affected. And so we were all feeling very strongly, obviously, especially this season with the extreme temperatures we've had and the heat that we have out there, the high fire danger. But council, questions or comments for Chief Bassett?
I do have one question. I'm curious as to why we just have cost recovery. Why isn't there any sort of like misdemeanor or anything associated with, or is it only once this gets out of control, then we're concerned everything else up to that point is a courtesy, or repeat offenders? How are we dealing with those sort of individuals?
So that's an automatic, Councilman. And so both cost recovery and the charge of violating the ordinance will be in place. So that's on the criminal side. This is catching any civil nature of recovery.
And this is located in our Title 13, which is our criminal code. So any violation of our criminal code is up to a Class B misdemeanor. But that's elsewhere in the code that it clarifies. But Section B specifies the unlawful fire.
Are you able to enforce it, Chief?
The enforcement side will come from our federal partners. It will come from the Davis County Sheriff's Office. And then on the city side, it will come from Centerville Police. And that will be on Chief Child's responsibility. And the Chief Child can tell you that they go on these fires all the time as well, up on our hillside in Centerville.
And I'm not sure how to ask the next question. Is there judiciary support for the enforcement, or is this a slap on the wrist?
Well, so for me, when you look at the cost of fighting these fires, you know, I think the reckless burning, depending on the circumstance, I'll let Chief Child talk about how they choose to enforce it. But I can tell you that what we've done in the past is it's $1,000 fine on the reckless burning, and then it's restitution for services rendered. And then if it gets to state and or forest, then the Forest Service will also go after 100% recovery costs to their cost to support the fire.
In the areas of concern on the hillside, do we have, if we were to pass this, do we have locations already identified for adequate signage to let people know we're serious about this? Because I'd hate to pass this and then just do it as a gotcha. I'd rather have people know that this is going to be an issue, and you know, the city and the county, everyone else is serious about it. Do you have any ideas on where you'd want to put signage or how that might work out?
So currently along our interface area, there is signage referencing the current code, and we will continue to support. I offered up, you know, the fire department to assist in purchasing more signs to install along the front area. We've also talked about the first phase of this will really be an education period where people need to, you know, understand the new restriction, the new ordinances. That's both on the forest side, on the county side, and on the city side. So we're prepared to move forward with that. And I've offered any support we can have with the fire department assisting in purchasing of signs, but a lot of those signs are currently in place.
So if I might comment here to maybe address Councilman Intz's question and give our perspective. We do have signage up there in regards to no fires, reflecting the current code. This ordinance is going to make it a lot less complicated and easier to enforce, more defined. So it's going to be helpful that way. Our approach thus far has been more of an educational approach. When we go up and we find someone with a fire, we will talk to them about it and the dangers associated with it and the regulations, and then call the fire department. So we've been calling the fire department on every fire to come up and completely extinguish those fires and make sure that they're completely out. In years past, we've had them, kind of empty a few bottles of water or something on it and spread it around. But in the last probably 2 years, we've decided that we need to make sure that those fires are completely out. So the fire department's been very good about responding on those cases, on those calls. And sometimes they're, 1 o'clock in the morning and they're happy to come out and take care of that. I think we've only issued one citation that I can think of where some individuals build a campfire right in the middle of the dry grass, the tall dry grass. And it was just completely ridiculous where they decided to build a fire. And of course, it didn't help that they were smoking some marijuana. And so we issued them a citation. I can't tell you for sure how the court handled that. I'd have to research that a little bit. But I think our position is going to be kind of evaluating on a case by case, see how egregious it is, and issue citations where we feel like it's the best way to resolve it. There is one thing that I do want to suggest in regards to this ordinance, and that is just entering or adding a additional clause under subsection F, where we are allowing some fires under certain circumstances in that November to March period, prohibiting the burning of pallets or anything that contains metal. So we'll have people come up, and say we do put in some kind of a fire pit somewhere that we decide is okay for people to make a fire in the bowl or wherever we feel like it might be okay. And someone comes up and brings up a whole bunch of pallets. Well, now we got a bunch of nails, or they bring up a couch and they burn the couch, and now we got a frame to deal with. So that's my recommendation on just a little bit more verbiage in there. And I've talked to Lisa about that. And, we wanted to just bring it to the council.
Yeah, and I looked at that. I think that we could just add another section to subsection F, and then maybe also just amend subsection E4, where they talk about no rubbish, garbage, waste, and just add similar language so that each section has the same language. So I want to thank Chief Bassett and Chief Child for bringing this forward and working with all the jurisdictions. I think it's been a team effort, and we're looking forward to getting this in place.
Well, and chiefs collectively, that's why I made the request about signage, because I've seen it up there, but I can't, just running mentally through my map, I can't say that there's anywhere that it strikes me as being fairly prominent. And so if there is an opportunity to put some signage at an area that you think is prominent, that would help. If nothing else, you could say you missed the 4x8 sign as you drove in. It's just conversation starter, if nothing else. I mean, if there's any locations like that, I would be interested in making sure that we have that, because the cost of the sign, as Chief Bassett said, is infinitesimal to even a basic response.
Right. Agreed.
Any further comments, or do I have a motion?
I would make a motion that we approve ordinance 2020-07 with regard to the new provisions for campfires and burning, recognizing that it should be modified in the next 2 to 4 weeks to expand the provisions as outlined.
Second.
We have a motion, a second.
Sorry, add the change.
Are you sure that's how you want to word it, Bill?
And if you could add
I never was a great wordsmith. Go ahead.
Lisa, do you need 2 to 4 weeks?
No, we just would like you to add the amendment that the chief would like regarding pallets and furniture.
So are you saying we don't?
Additional changes.
You're saying we don't need to re-vote on it?
No.
Okay, in that case, I would like to revise my motion to say that we would approve 2020-07 with regard to the new provisions for campfires and burning, including the agreed upon provision with regard to pallets and similar items which might be brought up for purposes of burning.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Further discussion? Roll call vote. Councilwoman Ivy.
Aye.
Councilman Ince.
Aye.
Councilman McEwen.
Aye.
Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes 5-0.
So,
you know, it's not always easy to word those motions. I'm glad I never have to do it.
may I ask the chief another question?
You betcha.
Chief, consistencies of news stories is not always really good. Are the state, the federal government recovering from people with regard to some of the fires that we hear about? The one that maybe was the most visible was the one down near Cedar City. Was it a year ago or 2 years ago, where a guy was doing some burning on his property, and I don't remember what it was, 700,000 acres or something was burned. He was fined. He's fighting it, went into bankruptcy. Will we recover anything?
I'm familiar with the case. I'm not familiar with the settled upon agreement, but I can tell you from my experience in years past, I know of I'm thinking of 3 fires we've had in Centerville where the Forest Service has recovered their costs from all 3 fires from the families. So, so a lot of the times the Forest Service will come to the table with negotiations, but they will, generally speaking, they are going to recover their costs related to that fire.
Really? Great.
And 2 years ago, we had a fire in Bountiful related to fireworks. And I can tell you that the individual was charged under the criminal code. The court made a request for all of our fees and time of service, and was issued recovery costs to the department on that individual. So I know that the courts have done that with my experience, both in the firework related fires and in the campfire or nuisance fire mistakes that have happened. Now, if somebody, for example, yesterday we had a fire in North Salt Lake on the hillside. An individual started a fire on the mountain because he was using a grinder, an edger, and it sparked and started the hillside on fire. That is nothing that we're going to go after or recover. But if somebody has an abandoned campfire or is doing something in a restricted zone or is willfully with due disregard for life safety, those things will occur. The fire, for example, another example to give you is we assisted Farmington with a fire just a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago, where what Chief Child is talking about. A bunch of kids took a couch up on the fire break road and lit it on fire. So those things do occur.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
It was my impression that we seldom recovered.
No, I know from the Centerville families, just because I've been here for so long, that I've heard from all of them regarding what they've had to go through and what challenges financially it's had on them. So it just kind of, and this year's a little bit different on the forest side because of COVID issues. They are aggressively fighting every fire as quickly as possible, trying to reduce the camps that we would set up. So they're throwing all the resources at it. For example, when we had our fire in Centerville a few weeks ago, I made a phone call and I had an airplane and a helicopter en route. A helicopter arrived just shortly after I did from my office. So that's how quickly the resources are getting in the air. So those are expensive resources, and unfortunately, if it's deemed that it's reckless, then those individuals will be held responsible to recover the cost from the Forest Service and from the municipality.
I wonder if it's appropriate, and I don't know, but I wonder if it's appropriate that we try and capture someone's story without reference to names and get the story on website to maybe try and communicate to people exactly what the ramifications are, because I get the impression in talking to people that people do not generally believe there are ramifications.
We are currently working on that very similar project with our most recent fire on the federal side. So I would just suggest that once we can get something agreed upon and get something produced, that you'll see that, hopefully. No guarantees, but hopefully you'll see something coming from that. And that is involving the 3 families who have been affected by losing their homes and the individuals with the responsibility.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank
Brant and Leah, just some thoughts, council brainstorm as well too, in addition to the signs on the hill. I mean, can we get it on the website, this new ordinance? Can we get it in utility bills? I know the newsletter, it's probably going to be after or close to the end of fire season. I mean, do you feel that's appropriate to get that information out there?
Yes, absolutely. We'll get it on Facebook with just, some information to help residents understand what was approved by council.
Okay.
Well, George's comment was somewhat tongue in cheek, I think, when he said the 4x4 sign, or 4x8 sign. The signs, as I recall, are more like 1x2.
They are, and most of the signs are targeted in targeted locations, at trailheads, at trailhead kiosks. I mean, there were people gather, but if we need to do some enhancement with that, I can get with Chief Child and we can work on that.
I would encourage that. I mean, the other things you use the signs are in targeted areas. Unfortunately, the signs are also targets.
Correct. Yeah. That's a whole nother issue we need to work on, but that's later.
Yeah, no, I understand, but okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Chief. Thank you. Thank all your firefighters as well too.
Thank you, Mayor. I will.
Unfortunately,
yeah, we probably ought to give the firefighters a round of applause the same way we did the police department.
Great.
Okay, round of applause for the firefighters.
Thank you all. Good to see you.
One thing that came of our meeting yesterday, unfortunately, because of COVID, they're not going to be able to do their open houses, which I think families and young children look forward to and is a great educational opportunity. So unfortunately, we won't have that, but we need to let them, as well as our police force, know of all the appreciation. Especially, they're not only fighting fires, but they're going out as first responders and wearing the masks and dealing with hurt people that may have the virus. So thank you so much.
Yeah, unlike some of us who can telecommute, we prefer that you don't perform your official functions.
Anything else? All right, let's go to item number 4. I think Chief Child wants to. a continuation of our urban deer, and I think he wants to talk about particular areas that he wants to propose something. So, Chief.
Yeah, so as I kind of outlined in the backup that's been provided to you, we do have some challenges with our deer. They tend to know where they can go to have a King's X. And so in the map that I provided to you, there are some locations that are owned by the city that would be helpful for us to have permission to go ahead and take deer from those selected locations. So, for example, we have a piece of property, a homeowner on Parish Lane that butts up against the 7th East up there, where across the street is some city property where our well house is and reservoir. And the deer go back and forth between his land and into the city property. And they do it very regularly. And it gets to be kind of difficult to take them on the private property, where it'd be much easier to get them to remove them when they are on the city property. And I've got 2 officers that have been designated as deer hunters, I guess, for this program, and then a couple of civilians. And they just came to me and said, you know, Chief, if we could hunt on that property, the top of Parish Lane, you can see the city property, Parish Lane well tank in blue there at the top of Parish. And said, if we could hunt on that land, we could take care of the problem that's happening there at 662 East. And those deer that are affecting that property are also affecting several other properties in that general area. I just had a lady call me today who would like us to be able to take deer, and she lives on Parish Lane right there just east of 400 East. So right in that particular little area there, we seem to have a lot of problems with deer, and they do kind of roam around from one property to another. I got a call today from Kyle Green, or a text today from Kyle Green, giving me a list of plants, tomatoes and so forth, that the deer enjoyed on his property and his grandpa's property overnight.
Well,
So
they
that's
walk
all
right up on his front doorstep.
yeah. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And we did look at some other properties where potentially it'd be nice, since we're doing this right now, instead of taking it one piece at a time, we kind of looked at strategically for a resource in the future, should it become reasonable and necessary, added in that property on First South, and then the top of Ricks Creek there, the Ricks Creek water tank area. We just thought, you know, those 2 areas, Randy Randall actually kind of suggested the property there on First South as an area that could be available to us. So that's what that is. In the red there, you see where we have current requests. We've had 1 or 2 come in since then that aren't included on that map, but we're definitely hearing from people now.
Chief, would it just simplify things if we said, if you see a game trail on city property, that's the discretion of you and your officers, rather than bringing this back again?
That would be fine with me. Obviously we're going to be very careful, and we're not going to be taking deer in a city park. We're not going to be shooting a deer in a city park. That's just not going to happen. But if there are some little pieces of property somewhere where it's, and maybe I might clarify on that, not an obvious city park that's developed and maintained. But yeah, I'd be happy with that language.
Can I ask a dumb question? Can you use a taser on deer?
So a taser is effective on deer. They have the same response that a human would have if you shot them with a taser. So essentially you would have a deer that would fall down for 5 seconds and then would be very agitated and motivated to leave in a quick hurry.
5 seconds? That doesn't give
5
me
seconds. Yeah, it's a 5-second burst. So when you pull the trigger, the probes go out, they make contact, they interrupt the central nervous system, the muscles lock up. This goes on for 5 seconds, and then it stops. And we could reinitiate it, but the more times you reinitiate it, more likely you might have a cardiac arrest or something. And I'm not sure why that is being thought of as an option, though. Maybe
I was asking the question.
Oh,
when you say you can't take them in a park.
Well, I don't think it would be appropriate to shoot a deer in a park. Just
well, no, I understand, but might you tase it in a park?
Oh, I don't know that we would be accomplishing anything if we tased it in a park. Like I say, it would go down as soon as the electrical current stops, which goes in 5-second cycles. The deer would be up and mobile and agitated.
Well, and I don't think that the sole reason to not do it in a park is just because of the danger to the people around, but the just the visual. It's not what a bunch of kids playing at a park want to see is a deer go down.
Yeah, and the other thing that would be difficult with the taser is you'd have to be within 21 feet of a deer. That's our outside range. It's 21 feet. So you'd have to sneak up on the deer and have them stay still long enough for you to get a bead on them and activate the taser. And the way their body is built, you'd have to hold your taser sideways because of the way the darts go out. And I just don't. I don't know.
Okay, that it's probably not viable then. I was truly asking the question. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. You watch on Hollywood someone getting tased and they go unconscious. That never happens. People are conscious throughout the whole thing.
So I have a question. Are we concerned about the one area, which is the Lee Scablin Park? I think people do go there kind of as nature walks, kind of enjoy the deer in that area. I don't know how about the homeowners around that area, but yeah, that would be my one concern with the areas we've chose, is that is kind of where we've chose to have a little nature area.
Yeah.
But have we chosen that we want deer running around in that area too?
I guess if you're sitting there on the park bench watching the deer or not.
Or
whether it's eating your garden or you're sitting on the park bench watching it.
Yeah, do we want plants and trees and that type of thing?
As you sit on the bench in the park watching them go from a neighbor's tomato garden over into the park.
Right, because the residents are right next to it.
Yeah, I'm comfortable giving the chief the latitude to make that call on city property. You've already basically said some of what your policy would be, chief, by just saying not in the city park. But I think that the discretion should be granted. We on the level of things we give discretion to our police department for, this is on the lower end. So I'm completely comfortable just turning this over to be a department decision.
I would agree with that. I think we've got, I understand that there would be outcry if a deer is killed in front of the wrong person. But at the same point in time, they are becoming a major burden in the community. Actually, they have become a major burden in the community.
And that same person who would give you the outcry is going to be equally upset when that deer gets hit by a car and is in pain, and then why haven't we come and dealt with it? There isn't really a win when it comes to trying to satisfy that end of the argument. It's just tough.
Everybody okay with taking a vote on that, or?
So I guess I could turn it into a formal motion that we instruct staff, specifically the city manager, to work with the police department, specifically with the chief, to develop policy to allow the taking of deer on city property where appropriate.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Chief. Any other questions in your mind before we move on?
No, thank you.
Okay, you look like you were being contemplative there, that you had maybe had something else to say.
Well, I just, the part about doing a policy, just, we'll have to write something up on that.
Oh.
Sorry to create more work for you, but we wanted to make sure you had the latitude.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yep, we're good.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it for all you're doing on that one, in addition to everything else. All right. Item number 5, this is the minutes review and acceptance from the August 4th, 2020 City Council minutes. Any changes on that? If not, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from August 4th, 2020 council meeting. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. City council report. Council member Ince, do you have anything to report?
Relatively little has happened, especially in the emergency response arena in the last 2 months because of the COVID situation. We are looking at a fall drill. We are waiting. Well, actually, we have gotten approval from the state to do a drill that would be a vaccination and pod exercise in preparation to help to distribute a COVID vaccine if and when one were to be available. The one we would be working on would be a flu vaccination exercise involving the commercial providers in the city and 2 pod locations that we would engineer and staff. That's about all I have to report.
Thank you. Item number 7 is the mayor's report. And maybe my first thing on follow up what Councilman Ince just said. I've been thinking over the last few days how you are all doing with your, because when we've had these reports, we haven't had as much to report. And I know that, not meeting face to face and maybe it's caused us to have less meetings, but how can we help you and support you with maybe some of your assignments in meeting with your committees? Some obviously have to meet, some don't. Planning Commission obviously has to meet. None of you over that, but anything we could do in that regard, in regards to Parks and Rec, Trail, Whitaker, et cetera, that we could help you with. Think about it and let me know if there's anything, because obviously things continue to go on. For instance, we just opened up a park and Parks and Rec is very involved with that sort of thing. And so we could, have things continue to go on. So albeit not meeting in person. So anything I can do to help you out there, please let me know. That would be, since I brought up the park, obviously we're all aware that Island View Park opened. If you haven't had a chance to go up. I went over yesterday at about 1 in the afternoon. It was 95 degrees. I felt the slides. They were pretty hot, but not as hot as I thought they'd be. But if you're in shorts, it could be difficult. But that's going to be probably the most extreme temperature that they'll get. So There was about 3 or 4 families there from a distance. I asked them how they liked it, and everybody was very positive. I know that Councilwoman Fillmore sent us some information last night. It sounds like we have a few glitches to fix, but that's to be expected when you open something new. But those are things I think we can take care of pretty quick.
And that was just, you know, because we do need to take care of those things. But the bulk of my message, the heavier part, was the absolute joy it was to go up there and just hear all of the laughing and the talking and the squealing and the playing. It was just pure joy.
And we're going to have to make Tamara the official videographer of the council too.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't
it? Hey, by the way, I want to do a shout out to Mike. My son came down from the park today and mentioned that there was a piece on the climbing tower that had come loose and was unsafe. And I called Bruce and he said, Mike's going to go up there and fix it. And that's an awfully tight fit. So thank you, Mike, for doing that, keeping it safe. I have had some concerns from citizens about the lack of, I guess we used to have little dog bags in a dispenser and a place to deposit those. I had an elder lady in the community who told me that she regularly goes to the park and picks up after all of that. And so the fact that we don't have a garbage can there, we had thought that it was working well and that people were picking up after themselves, but this older woman is picking up after a lot of people. And I don't think that's fair. So if we could continue looking into that and see if maybe we could provide a garbage can and some little bags for those extra presents, that would be appreciated.
Aren't those like little eagle projects that you do? I'm wondering how many of those we've purchased at the city.
Yeah.
No.
So,
those projects have pretty well gone away.
So if I might interject on that point, I was up walking Island View Park 2 mornings ago, and it might have been the same woman, I don't know, but I was approached by a lady with that same concern, and I called Bruce, and he said that he was going up, I think the next morning, to put up some doggy bags on the east side. So that should probably have already been taken care of, and he said that there's supposed to be a dumpster on the west side and the east side, but that is an Ace, I think, was kind of holding up the delivery of it. The intent was to get him in there, but there's been a delay on getting him delivered.
Okay, good to know.
Thanks, Chief. That's good.
There's only been one person so far standing on top of the climbing tower.
Well,
that you saw.
Yeah, that we saw.
We predicted that you got it in the first week, so that's good.
Going back to the comment from Stephanie and Paul and this lady picking up. As a dog owner, I have always tried to not bless other people with my dog's leavings. Do we need to put some signs up? I mean, I find that very frustrating.
The top section of Island View has historically been pretty bad that way. I have not been up in this past week to check and see how it's going.
I'm not sure what we have at all our parks. Do we have signs up in other parks at all where please clean up after your dog? I'm not saying if we don't, that's fine. I mean, if you feel we should do that or not, but.
I know for sure we do in the community park. They're actually attached to the same freestanding pole with the little doggy bag containers on. So hopefully that's a set.
So if Bruce was going up there to put bags, I imagine he's putting them in a container. So maybe we should do the same type of thing there.
That sounds great.
I think we should.
Of course, maybe he already has.
It's obvious that we should have it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, fun. Stephanie, or Councilwoman Ivy, you'll keep that camera focused on the tower for us 24/7, right? So,
there is a groan that goes up each evening as the lights go out. That's for sure.
really? Another thing that's happened, the Planning Commission has been quite busy over the last couple months, and there's a couple of things that didn't have to come before the council, and so it was a determination was made that on our website we're going to put just an email address where you can email Planning Commission, and then they can get those emails out to the individual commissioners. And we thank Councilwoman Meekin for bringing that up. So wanted to inform you of that. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll have a couple of appointments for you. And we need to replace a planning commissioner and also get somebody on the Board of Appeals. And I talked with people. I just didn't have time to get them you information yet. So any other questions for me? The chief took care of my chief facet of my fire report. So you don't need to hear more there. So if not, then we'll move on to number 8, the city manager's report. Brant?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. I don't have much. Just one item I want to touch base on that I'd sent in the weekly update, and that is the closing of City Hall and the Public Works building to the public just on Friday. We are having some staffing concerns as far as coverage. We want to make sure we're providing customer service, but we also want to make sure we're socially distancing and make sure we're not infecting other employees. So the thought would be, the customer service, we will have an employee or two here at City Hall that if there were any cases, we can by appointment only, but we'll definitely have someone here to answer phone calls. We tend not to be very busy on Fridays, but that is also when we have the most limited staff. We do have a couple employees that are out on Fridays on a regular basis. So the thought would be to continue to support the public, reduce our exposure to the public slightly, make sure our employees are protected, not being exposed to COVID. We'll work with each department. Each department kind of has their own, needs as far as how they work with, in the field and things like that. But I'm more primarily just talking about, serving the public at City Hall and Public Works. And we'll maintain our same hours Monday through Thursday. Friday will just be closed to the public or by appointment only. Any questions or concerns about that? And this is only temporary. This is not a permanent change. This is only during this pandemic as we try to figure out our staffing and make sure we can serve the public as best we can. I would like to close down and like Councilmember McEwen and the Department of Health, but we want to be open to the public. That's our primary responsibility, I feel, is customer service. But at the same time, we have a concern about protecting our employees. So trying to balance that.
I prefer to keep it as limited, to limit that limitation as much as possible, but at the same point in time, there are certain urgencies, I guess.
Thank you. That's all I have at this time. A few other items to discuss, but we'll discuss that in the next session.
I just have to make one comment. If you haven't gone by the city yet, go by the new doors, give the welcome feel. And we're trying to, especially when we get over COVID, we can get back. We're trying to give the welcome feel plus protect our employees. And it's very welcoming, in my opinion. And I went by there late last night. So look at it sometimes if you haven't been by it.
Do our key fobs still work?
Yes. The key fob does not work right now on the exterior door. If you're going to come into City Hall after hours, you need to enter through the north door to the basement to get into City Hall right now. They're connecting the fob on the exterior door. In the next couple of days, I'll have that finalized.
And Clark, I agree with you. It's almost like one of those home improvement things. We totally opened up the space. So it's a totally different feel in that lobby to have all that sunlight coming in.
Yeah, for sure. I loved it. All right, Brent, you said you're done. So I guess what we're looking at, council, is I'm looking for a motion to go from city council to a closed session.
I'd make a motion that we adjourn city council meeting into a closed session without the intent to return to city council.
Bill, you want to state the purpose?
And also if I could
Break
add
for
a
that.
third purpose to that, and that is to discuss security measures. So we have 3 reasons to go into the closed session.
A closed session to discuss purchase and exchange of or lease of real property, discuss character professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. And what was the last one, Brent?
Discuss security measures.
Discuss security measures as outlined in the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, but could we have a 5-minute break?
Yep, I was just
I'm
going
in
to
the
say
middle
that.
of an insurance thing and I missed the phone call from the adjuster I've been trying to catch for 3 days.
Councilwoman Ivy, let's do a little break, 5 to 10 minutes. Remember that it is to go in a different channel.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Okay. All righty.
Thank
So we're done with this Zoom here. Thank you.
Thank you.